House will please come to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber at this time. All members and guests in the galleries will please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by Reverend Dr. Anna Pinckney Straight, guest of the lady from the 42nd, Delegate Lavender Bow.
Let us pray. God of mountains and valleys, hills and hollers, you are known in many ways and by many names. I know you as Jesus, Holy Spirit, creating God. Thank you for this day, the gift of hours stretching before us in which to sing your praise, bring you glory through living, speaking, laws, choices, budgets. Hear our prayers for the power of this house, authority granted by votes. Hear our prayers that these delegates would hear too, voices too often set aside, the scared, the hungry, the worried, the different, places too often unseen, hurt and want and illness in its many forms holding us back. Hear teachers laboring to build both our present and our future. Lord, we pray because we are West Virginians, strong, stubborn, who won't give up, who will refuse to give in to binary thinking, who dream and piece together what is possible that nobody ever thought of before, willing to turn the system inside out and upside down to make this government fierce and fabulous for its people, bringing more seats to the table, making the pie larger, loving our differences, which together weave a tapestry that is stronger than any one thread could ever hope to be. God, you are underground and soaring high on the thermals. May the power embedded and imbued in these delegates be power shared, power used to strengthen. For you, God, are like a mother who will not forsake her nursing child. You are like a father who runs to welcome the prodigal home. And this day is your day. And it is in your many names that we pray. Amen.
Amen. Members and guests will please remain standing as we are led in the Pledge of Allegiance today by the lady from the 42nd, Delegate Lavender Bow.
Thank you. Please stand and join us as we honor our flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Friday, February 15th, 2019.
Gentleman from the 42nd, Delegate Campbell.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
The gentleman from the 42nd asks unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. So ordered. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to proceed to the 7th order of business for the purpose of considering House Resolution 15, memorializing the life of the Honorable Mary Pearl Compton, teacher and public servant.
Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Members and guests in the galleries will please rise. Lady in the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today with us we have the family of Mary Pearl Compton. Escorting our special guests into the chamber are delegates Fleshauer, Campbell, Lavender Bow, and others.
Clerk will please report the resolution.
House Resolution 15.
Lady in the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that reference of the resolution to a committee be dispensed with and it be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption.
The lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that reference of House Resolution 15 to a committee be dispensed with, that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration and put upon its adoption. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. The committee reference is dispensed with. The clerk will please read the resolution.
Whereas Mary Pearl Compton was born on September 24th, 1930 at Rennick, Greenbrier County, West Virginia, the daughter of the late Russell K. and Susie Scheiser Geyer. Mary Pearl graduated from Concord College with a B.S. and went on to earn an M.A. CAS from West Virginia University. She began her career as an educator in 1948 and taught in Monroe and Greenbrier counties. Mary Pearl was first elected to the West Virginia House of Delegates in 1988 and was re-elected in 1990, 1992, 1994, 1996, 1998, and 2000. During her 14 years in the House of Delegates, she served as a member of the Committee on Education and as Vice Chair of the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources for the 70th and 71st Legislature and Chair of the Committee on Health and Human Resources for the 72nd, 73rd, and 74th Legislature. Mary Pearl was a trustee and elder of the Union Presbyterian Church. She was also a member of Delta Kappa Gamma, Kappa Delta Phi, the International Reading Association, and was a charter member of the Monroe Reading Council and a charter member and past president of the West Virginia State Reading Council. In addition, she was a member of the Monroe County Historical Society and a charter member and past president of the Greenbrier County Historical Society. Mary Pearl was predeceased by her husband, Delmer R. Compton, a sister, June S. Geyer Hill, and two half-brothers, Russell Hill Geyer and Thomas Hill Geyer. She is survived by two sisters, Betty Penrod and Pat Tomlinson of Lewisburg, and a brother, George Schisler Geyer of Grand Blanc, Michigan. She is also survived by many nieces, nephews, and cousins. Sadly, the Honorable Mary Pearl Compton passed away on June 21st, 2017. Therefore, be it resolved by the House of Delegates of the West Virginia Legislature that the House of Delegates hereby memorializes the life of the Honorable Mary Pearl Compton, teacher, principal, history buff, and public servant, and be it further resolved that the House of Delegates hereby extends its sincere sympathy at the passing of the Honorable Mary Pearl Compton, and be it further resolved that the Clerk of the House of Delegates forward a copy of this resolution to the family of the Honorable Mary Pearl Compton.
The question before the House is the adoption of the resolution. A roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. The question is, shall the resolution be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. The clerk will please report the votes of those delegates escorting our guests in the well of the chamber today as having voted in the affirmative. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 98 ayes, 0 nays, 2 members absent not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the resolution adopted. House will please briefly stand at ease while the chair presents the resolution. Members and guests may be seated. Introduction to guests. Gentleman the 16th, Doug Mant.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's nothing like sitting in your chair and bouncing right back up. I appreciate the exercise this morning. Hey, over here in the North Gallery, I have some friends of mine, some very, I call them VIPs. I'm going to reintroduce one here in a minute, but if y'all would please stand, I have Noah Casso, accompanied by his mother, Brandy, and I have my good friend, Gracie Black. She's accompanied by her father and mother, Chris and Christy Black. They're from Cabell County, and they're middle school students at Milton. I'd like the chamber to make them feel welcome today. Thank you.
The gentleman the 7th, Doug Harshbarger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'm blessed to have a couple pages from Pleasants County Middle School. Actually, two of them are standing right behind me here. Adam Bennett and Abby Martin, and then down here on the floor we have Kyle Jones. And with them today are their parents in the West Gallery, Kathy Martin, Whitney Bennett, Steve and Christy Jones. So if the House could give them a warm welcome, I appreciate it. Thank you.
The gentleman the 59th, Doug Kump.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to introduce two very special people, if they would stand, please. My wife, Cheryl Kump, and also Patty Adams would stand. Cheryl is my special beloved nursemaid, and Patty is my political nursemaid, my campaign manager. Give them a good welcome.
The gentleman the 46th, Doug Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the North Gallery today we have a gentleman from Lewis County, Rick Thainer. If he would stand up, and any members from the CDLs from Lewis or Upshur counties, if they'd please stand, the House make them feel welcome.
The gentleman the 40th, Doug Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have with us is a page from Elkview Middle School, James Clendenin. He is chaperoned by his parents, Kevin and Tabitha Clendenin. James, stand up. And if you all would, please make James and his parents feel welcome today. Thank you.
The gentleman the 29th, Doug Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to have as guests today in the North Gallery my parents, Larry and Donna Steele, my mom and dad. If they'd stand up and the House would make them feel welcome.
The gentleman the 48th, Doug Hamrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a number of guests with us for West Virginia CDL Day from Harrison County. We have Dave Freeman, Matt Freeman, Taryn Freeman, Kylie Freeman, as well as Patrick Moore. And I know I saw Will Hyman and his wife somewhere up there in the gallery, and as well as Joe Second. If I missed anyone else from Harrison County, they can stand if the House would please make them welcome.
The gentleman the 63rd, Doug Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize my predecessor, the quiet guy from the 63rd before I was here, and maybe, just maybe, the next governor of the great state of West Virginia, Mike Folk.
Either of you. Either of you. Daryl. The gentleman the 62nd, Doug Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I got several introductions I'd like to make. First, my predecessor, the longest serving delegate in West Virginia history, Delegate John Overington, who joins us in the chamber this morning. I'd like to give him a warm round of applause. And Mr. Speaker, up in the North Gallery, my wife, Jean, of 46 years, is here to join us. I'd like to her stand up and we could give her a warm welcome. And in the South Gallery, too many to mention, but all my good friends from the West Virginia CDL from Berkeley County area in the Eastern Panhandle, if you could also give them a warm welcome for traveling all the way five hours to get here to join us this morning.
The gentleman at 25th, Doug Painter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the PAGE program, I'd like to introduce some kids from my alma mater, Baileysville Elementary and Middle. I started school the day that building opened, and I still bleed blue. And they are Destiny Morgan, Caitlin Lester, Mackenzie Morgan, and they are escorted by Faith Morgan, Haley Morgan, and Gary St. Clair. Let's give them all a big house welcome.
The gentleman to 17th, Doug Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take this occasion to introduce two pages that are with us today from the best middle school in the state, Vinson Middle School, which happens to be my old school. First is Michael Fortner, who's accompanied by Lisa Fortner, if they would stand and be recognized. The second is Jenna Clemens, who's accompanied by Jennifer Clemens. If they'd all stand and with the house and give them a big welcome.
The gentleman to 16th, Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can't see him up there, but I know he's here somewhere. Stan Legg and Jeff Miller, two great supporters of mine and members of the CDL. And also, would the House please make Patrick Moore feel welcome? He managed to get chickens through security that I bought from him this morning.
The gentleman to first, Doug McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All the way down from the Fighting First District of the Free State of Hancock, I have a few great friends with us today. In the North Gallery, I have a good close friend, President of the West Virginia Citizens Defense League, Mr. Ian Masters. I also see a good friend next to him, Keith Morgan. You guys stand up. I also have a clap for these guys. And somewhere in the gallery, I also have a couple more good friends, Scott and Debbie Robinson, along with a great philosophical friend, Kevin Patrick, Jr. If you guys would please stand up and the House make them feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 48th, Doug Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the delegates from the 48th District, we have 3 pages with us today. If they would stand when I call your name. Miley Smell, Bria Smell, and Ethan Smell. They are also escorted by their parents, Jeff and Cindy. Would the House make the Smell family welcome today?
The gentleman from the 14th, Doug Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Joining us in the North Gallery, I have some great friends up there. First from Jordan Baptist Church, and if these gentlemen would stand as I call their names. Bo Burgess, Nate Burgess, Nick Burgess, David Ebert, and Tim Siders. And also from Grace Baptist Church, we have John Pinson. If the House would please welcome them.
The gentleman from the 31st, Doug Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have some pages from Trap Hill Middle School. If they would stand when I call their name. Phelan Taylor, Brand Bloom, Tristan Harper, Maggie Witten, and their teacher, Aaron England, and their parents are in the West Gallery. If the House would give them a warm welcome.
The gentleman from the 9th, Doug Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we have a doctor of the day coming to us from Morgantown. He's also the chair of WVU Department of Family Medicine. Please welcome Dr. Dana King.
The gentleman from the 10th, Dr. Kelly.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Today we have a page with us from Wood County, and if you would join the delegates from Wood County and make Sean Conley back here in the back Make Sean feel welcome today. He is accompanied today by his grandparents, Roger and Catherine Conley, and they should be in the gallery somewhere. If they'd stand, please. Please put your hands together and make them feel welcome. Thank you.
The gentleman of the 60th, Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to invite your attention to the South Gallery. Got some friends up there. Actually, they might be all over the place. They're from all over the state. Mr. Martin Traver Sr., Mr. Martin Traver Jr., Mike Kiesecker, Carrie Kiesecker, Hannah Kiesecker, Bonnie Kiesecker, Josh Storer, Terry Storer, Mike Wilson, Cody Wilson, no relation to me, at least not as far back as Scotland, Randy Turner, Elaine Turner, Randy Barnhart, Mad Matt Johnston, and Miss Sherry Horst and Chuck Horst. If the House would please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of the 27th, Doug Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to make an announcement regarding one of your conference committees today.
Gentleman may proceed.
All right. House Bill 2351, prior authorization conference committee that was scheduled at 12:45 in the government organization room is going to be moved to the back of the Senate chamber at the same time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
At 12:45?
12:45.
Thank you. The gentleman of the 35th, Doug Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of myself and the other members from the 35th District, we have some friends here from the West Virginia Citizens Defense League in the South Gallery. Amber Perry, Jason Means, and all those from the 35th District. Would you please stand and the House make them feel welcome?
The gentleman of the 23rd, Doug Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two introductions to make. First, in the South Gallery, longtime friend and neighbor, UMW member Ronnie Justice, if he would stand and the House make him feel welcome. And Mr. Speaker, it's my honor. This is the first opportunity I've been able to do this since I've been seated at the House, as be able to introduce a predecessor, gentlelady from Boone, Dolores Cook.
The gentleman of the 24th, Doug Rodriguero.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Tomlin and myself, we have two visitors from Chapmanville, West Virginia. They're representing the CDL. Josiah Cook and Philip Williamson. Will you stand up, please, and the floor please make you welcome.
The gentleman of the 17th, Doug Lovejoy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Wayne County delegation, we have 2 pages from Vincent Middle School, Abby Adams and Annie Rutherford, if they would stand. They're accompanied by their chaperone, which is April Wallace, seated in the West Gallery. Please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman of the 42nd, Doug Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegate Lavender Bowe and myself, in the back of our chamber here, we have a former member from the old 28th District, and I get the feeling he's kind of happier over on that side of the chamber here, but I'd like to welcome from Greenbrier County former Delegate Bill Wallace.
The gentleman of the 50th, Doug Angelucci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Delegates Caputo and Longstreth, I'd like to take a moment to introduce in the South Gallery Ben Tacey. He is the program coordinator for Pierpont Community Technical College's School of Emergency Medical Services. I'd like to take a moment to thank him for his hard work for educating our first responders. And secondly, forgive me, I have the capital crud here. Secondly, I want to introduce someone that is the most influential person in my life. This guy taught me the power of love. He taught me how to care for one another, taught me how to help one another, and taught me how to treat people with dignity and respect. So I'd like to take the moment in the West Gallery to welcome my dad down to the Capitol. Would the House please make him feel welcome?
The gentleman of 34th, Doug Boggs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're very pleased to have with us 2 pages from Gilmer County today, from Cedarville. They're here in the gallery. First, we have David Brannon, and also his sister Laura Brannon. David is a 8th grader at Gilmer County Middle High School. Laura is a student at Gilmer County Elementary School. If they would stand, and members would make them welcome, and also their parents are in the West Gallery, Joe and Azetta Brannon. If they would stand and please make them welcome.
Lady from the 38th, Douglas Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to be able to introduce Scott Fairchild, but I understand he went over to the Senate side. So instead, I am the 38th District, so if there's any West Virginia Citizens Defense League members who are from Cross Lanes, Scott Depot, Nitro, or Taze Valley, I'd like for you to stand so I can welcome you to the chamber. And I'm a proud member of the Citizens Defense League, and this is my favorite day of the year. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 59th, Doug Kump.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've already welcomed the West Virginia Citizens Defense League members from Berkeley County, but I would be remiss not also to welcome the rest of my district, the West Virginia Citizens Defense League members from mighty Morgan County. Please welcome.
Gentleman from the 40th, Doug Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize Catherine Moles with the West Virginia Citizens Defense League in the 40th District, and anybody else that I may be missing today. Thank you for being here. Let's make them feel welcome.
Are there further introductions? The gentleman from the 22nd, Doug Jeffries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also, as a member of the West Virginia Citizens Defense League, I want to make sure nobody was missed. I want everybody with the Citizens Defense League to please rise. They're here lobbying for House Bill 2519 for the Campus Protection Act, and we hope to get that passed, and everybody please make them feel welcome.
The gentleman from the 45th, Doug Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to, for the House to welcome everyone from West Virginians for Life today. Thank you for being here.
Are there further introductions? If not, report to standing committees.
Your Joint Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined, found truly enrolled, and on February 14th, 2019, presented to His Excellency the Governor for his action, Committee Substitute for House Bill 2307, relating to creating a provisional license for practicing barbering and cosmetology.
Report to be received.
Your Joint Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined, found truly enrolled, and on February 15th, 2019, presented to His Excellency the Governor for his action, Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 240, repealing certain legislative rules no longer authorized or are obsolete. Senate Bill 267, requiring State Board of Education adopt policy detailing level of computer science instruction. Senate Bill 324, relating to Commissioner of Agriculture employees. And Senate Bill 354, expiring funds to balance of Auditor's Office, Chief Inspector's Fund.
Report to be received.
Your Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 3016 relating to the State Aeronautics Commission. Reports the same back with amendment, with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
Committee on Government Organization has had under consideration House Bill 2924 permitting the West Virginia Tourism Office to decide to contract with the Division of Highways to sell advertising space on the West Virginia 511 website site, and House Bill 3093 relating to standards for factory-built homes. Reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Government Organizations had under consideration House Bill 2982 amending and updating the laws relating to auctioneers, and House Bill 3007 authorizing the Commissioner of Agriculture to require background checks. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 2865 changing the school aid formula Step 7 allowances for instructional technology and enrollment, advanced placement, and dual credit. Reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
Committee on Education has had under consideration House Bill 2688 requiring air conditioning on all school buses. Reports the same back with amendment with recommendation that it do pass as amended, that it be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to Committee on Finance.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2872 authorizing law enforcement officers to assist the state fire marshal. House Bill 3083 adding temporary work during legislative session as exclusion to the term employment for purposes of unemployment compensation. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 356 requiring maps provide state and federal prosecutors information. Senate Bill 358 exempting purchasing division purchases for equipment to maintain security at state facilities. And committee substitute for Senate Bill 387 relating generally to extradition. Reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2966 County Budget Flexibility Act and committee substitute for Senate Bill 373 relating to financial responsibility of inmates. Reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass, that they be referred to Committee on Finance.
Report to be received. Bills be referred to Committee on Finance.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 2856 relating to the administration of the operating fund of the Securities Division of the Auditor's Office. Reports the same back with its title amended with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 2515 exempting the sale and installation of mobility enhancing equipment from the sales and use tax. Reports the same back with its title amended with recommendation that it do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 2667 supplemental appropriation Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety Division of Corrections, and Senate Bill 452 supplemental appropriation to Second Chance Driver's License Program. Reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 2532 allowing certain donations by persons renewing their driver's license or vehicle registration, and House Bill 2855 allowing rebate monies to be used for the operation and maintenance of accounting and transparency systems of the state auditor. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Finance has had under consideration House Bill 2854 exempting sales from the Consumers Sales and Service Tax and Use Tax by not-for-profit volunteer school support groups raising funds for schools. Reports back committee substitute, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 2907 requiring a form of a certified commitment order to the Division of Corrections or Rehabilitation. House Bill 2933 modifying the criminal penalties imposed on a parent, guardian, or custodian for child abuse resulting in injury, and House Bill 2980 Mine Trespass Act. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Judiciary has had under consideration House Bill 3039 relating to a court's consideration of the expression of a preference by a child in certain child custody matters, and committee substitute for Senate Bill 270 streamlining process for utilities access to DOH rights-of-way. Reports the same back with recommendation that each do pass.
Report to be received.
Committee on Banking and Insurance has had under consideration House Bill 2968 adding a remote service unit to the definition of customer bank communications terminals. Reports the same back with recommendation that it do pass, that it be referred to Committee on Judiciary.
Report to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Committee on Government Organizations had under consideration House Bill 2886 for establishing requirements for a Division Motor Vehicles Office or Division of Motor Vehicles, now kiosk, to be present present in the county, and House Bill 2929, authorizing the West Virginia Tourism Office to enter into an agreement with the Division of Highways to provide staff at the Welcome Centers. Reports back committee substitutes, therefore, with recommendation that the committee substitutes each do pass.
Report to be received. Further reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, messages from the executive, messages from the Senate.
Clerk of the Senate announced the Senate has passed without amendment committee substitute for House Bill 2521 relating to permitting fur bearer parts.
Message be received.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 60, licensing practice of athletic training.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 66, prohibiting certain misleading lawsuit advertising practices.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 393, protecting right to farm.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 516, relating to attorney fees and subsidized adoptions.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 518, restricting sale and trade of dextromethorphan.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 563, prohibiting sexual assault victim be subjected to certain physical examinations.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 590, permitting guided bear hunts by licensed outfitters and guides.
Message to be received. Bill be referred to the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, then the Committee on Judiciary. Further messages from the Senate, resolutions.
House Concurrent Resolution 73, United States Army Sergeant Matthew T. Miller Memorial Bridge.
Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with and they be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the chamber automation system.
Lady from the 49th asked unanimous consent that further reading of resolutions introduced be dispensed with, that each resolution be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Are there objections? Chair hears no objections. Petitions, motions, bills introduced, unfinished business, bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2768, reducing the use of certain prescription drugs.
The gentleman from the 27th, Delegate Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill makes some clarifications to the Opioid Reduction Act of 2018. Definitions are added to clarify the applicability of this article. Additionally, different terms were used interchangeably in the prior, meaning one term was chosen to clarify this article. A definition of surgical procedure was also added to clarify on when a 7-day prescription is permitted. There is also clarification of when the initial prescription of a Schedule II opioid occurs. A physical examination must occur that is relevant to the course of treatment for the patient. It also provides that a narcotics contract may contain certain additional information that was not provided in statute previously. That narcotics contract also occurs in concurrence with issuance of the third prescription for an opioid. A provision is also added which clarifies a pharmacist's role in enforcing certain provisions within the article. Pharmacists were confused over their role in the previous code. This change does not remove a pharmacist's responsibility under his or her scope of practice from not filling a prescription. Additionally, there were concerns that were raised by Medicaid about some requirements previously enacted. Changes are made in the current code to ensure compliance with federal regulations. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? The gentleman from 36, Delegate Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speak to the bill.
Gentleman may proceed.
I appreciate the chairman's explanation of this bill, but however, the parameters that he spoke about that this bill is supposed to do to reduce the use of opioids was implemented last year. This is actually a bill to reduce the effectiveness of that. There's some changes. It changes opioid drug to Schedule II opioids only. It also removes the requirement that the pharmacy board be implemented into this law, and actually omits the pharmacy board completely. I think what has happened here is last year we put some regulations in to enact forceful legislation to try to reduce, as the short title says, reduce the use of certain prescription drugs. And we did that last year. And what's happened is the industry has complained. Insurance companies don't like it. Medicaid doesn't like it. Some doctors don't like it. Some pharmacists don't like it, which unfortunately, to reduce the use of opioids, we're going to have to piss those people off. And I think that we're going the wrong direction with this legislation. I would encourage the body to vote no.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? Does the gentleman from 27th wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to address some of those concerns, when we enacted the bill last year, there were several instances where there was inconsistencies about prescribing post-operatively, and in certain cases where people that required more than a 7-day prescription. This bill does clarify certain instances there. We found that that was something that needed to have immediate address. It was discussed over the interim session, and that's why it's here before you. And regarding Medicaid services, on the portion that required treatments such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, etc., there was a limitation that said no need for a prescription or order from a provider. Federal law requires that. CMS requires that. So that is back into that part of the code. So those clarifications are there. As regarding the Board of Pharmacy, they're not out of the bill. It just says there was confusion with a pharmacist filling a prescription, that they were not held to filling that prescription if they did not have to. The Board of Pharmacy still will hold them accountable for their scope of practice, and so that's still in the bill. So, Mr. Speaker, I do urge passage.
For what purpose does the lady from the 50th, Doug Longstress, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to speak to the bill, or I'd like to ask the health chair a question. I'm sorry.
The gentleman has closed debate.
Will he yield? Closed debate?
Does the
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the question before the House then is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. 75 ayes, 26 nays. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. Clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2768.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2834, updating and modernizing the minimum spacing provisions for the drilling of horizontal deep wells.
The gentleman from the 8th, Doug Anderson, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well spacing limitations are established to increase production efficiencies and limit waste of oil and gas. The goal is to maximize recovery of oil and gas, natural gas from the entire field and not a particular well. The current deep well spacing limitations are set at 3,000 feet between deep wells producing from the same formation and 400 feet from unit or lease boundaries. These limits were established when conventional vertical wells in mind before modern horizontal drilling techniques were developed. As a result, exceptions to spacing requirements are routinely made to maximize field recovery from horizontal deep wells. In an effort to modernize the spacing requirements for deep wells and to reduce the need for exceptions being granted, the bill modifies the powers and duties of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission by imposing limitations under the Commission's duty to regulate horizontal deep wells. All other wells will remain unaffected. Under the bill, the Commission may not impose spacing limitations greater than 1,000 feet between the horizontal deep wells operated by different operators, or require a setback of more than 500 feet from the boundary that divides different operations. The Commission may not establish minimum well setback or spacing requirements between horizontal deep wells operated by the same operator or multiple operators who agree in writing to the appropriate spacing. In addition, the Commission may not include the area of the well pad or vertical or angled portions of the well bore to calculate distances between deep wells. However, the Commission may continue to include well pads and angled portions of well bores within the unit boundaries for the determination of royalty payments. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage of the bill.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? If not, those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 100 ayes, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. Majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2834.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2849, establishing different classes of pharmacy technicians.
The gentleman from the 27th, Dr. Ellington, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is the product of a Sunrise application that was filed by the Board of Pharmacy and reviewed during the 2018 legislative interims by the Performance Evaluation and Review Division. The legislative auditor recommended approval of the board's request to allow the creation of nuclear pharmacy technicians licensure endorsement and additions to the pharmacy technician's scope of practice. The performance of a pharmacy technician product verification, also known as the check type quality, is permitted if the pharmacist technician has 2 years experience and is approved to do so by his or her pharmacist in charge. Most of these classifications would refer to pharmacists in hospital setting. Mr. Speaker, I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? The gentleman from the 32nd, Doggett Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the chairman please yield for question?
Chairman does yield.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of years ago, we passed a bill, and it became law to allow pharmacy tech students in vocational high school settings to be able to sit for their pharmacy tech exam upon completing that program. Does this bill have any alteration of that bill at all?
Nothing to that, no. It just says if someone's had that extra experience, they can increase their scope of practice.
All right, thank you.
And it creates the nuclear one, which is not currently here in this state.
Thank you.
The gentleman from the 13th, Dr. Cadle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rule 49, I have a family member, it's a tech.
A family member who would be impacted by this legislation?
Pharmacy tech.
As the gentleman's explained the facts, the gentleman would be a member of a class of larger than 5 members and therefore would be directed to vote. Are there other members who wish to speak to the passage of the bill? Does the gentleman wish to close debate? If not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 100 ayes, 0 nays, 0 absent, not voting. A majority of those present having voted in the affirmative, chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2849.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Request concurrence therein. Are there further bills on third reading? Bills on second reading?
Senate Bill 377 relating to minimum wage and maximum hour standards.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senate Bill 377 was postponed one day on 2 separate days, and therefore Chair would ask if there is objection to the clerk beginning anew to report all amendments again. Chair hears no objection. Are there amendments?
The Committee on Judiciary moves to amend the bill. This is H. Jude AM 2-8.
Does the gentleman 27th Delegate Schott wish to explain the committee amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the strike and insert amendment of the Judiciary Committee to Senate Bill 377. And all we really did was recognize that in a couple places the words maximum wage was clearly improper, and we replaced that with maximum hour. Just change wage to hour in 2 places. Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption.
Are there amendments to the amendment?
Delegate Lovejoy moves to amend the amendment. This is HFA Lovejoy 2-14.
Does the gentleman of 17th Delegate Lovejoy wish to explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll stand on the discussion of last week. It's simply to remove the subsection for a sub-minimum wage for certain workers with disabilities.
Question before the House is adoption of the amendment. The gentleman 27th Delegate Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And basically reasserting my opposition to this amendment from last week, we did have a couple of days to follow up. As you'll recall, the focus of the amendment is to remove from the protection of this statute those individuals who are so severely handicapped that the only opportunity for employment they have is one of these what we call opportunity workshops. I had an opportunity to follow up with my workshop here in Mercer County and gain some information. I'd like to just read to you from their website a description of what they do. I think it covers that so much better than anything I could do. It says, Mercer County Opportunity Industries is a nonprofit based out of Princeton, West Virginia, which has proudly served West Virginia and Virginia since 1965. We assist our job seekers in every step of the process while working closely with their rehabilitation counselor, teachers, and parents, as well as other interested individuals who want to see them succeed. Our motto is helping others to help themselves, and that is just what we do. We closely monitor our participants' progress to ensure they are learning the essential parts of not only employment, but also independent living. Once a job seeker completes our training, they are ready to obtain and maintain employment. However, many times job seekers use our training as a stepping stone to further training, thus allowing them even more employment opportunities. Keep in mind that most of these individuals are on Social Security disability, and based upon the Social Security disability restrictions, they can only earn a certain amount. So basically what happens is the more they earn, the less hours they can work, because they hit that threshold sooner rather than later if they're earning more money. In the case of this particular workshop, I'm pleased to report, and I know the gentleman from the 17th will be pleased to hear, that our most recent hire as executive director is now paying all of these individuals the minimum wage. So with respect to the current situation with regard to our workshop, the removal of this protection does not help does not hurt the workshop so long as it's able to continue paying minimum wage. I will relate to you, based on my conversation with the director, that part of the reason it is able to pay minimum wage is strong support from the community, other nonprofits and churches and so forth. As long as that support continues, then the workshop will be able to pay minimum wage. If that support declines, and I'm sure all of you know the unfortunate situation in southern West Virginia, we are not in the throes of an economic expansion there. We are basically seeking to survive. So the removal of this, the reason I continue to oppose this amendment, although currently it wouldn't harm our facility, there are other facilities throughout the state that may be harmed by this amendment. Plus, it removes the ability of our workshop to be able to adjust, if necessary, to changing economic conditions and an erosion of the current support. We currently serve about 60 individuals a month from that facility. As I said, it's been around since 1965. It does amazing, amazing work. It helps a lot of these individuals transition, but almost as important as giving them a sense of accomplishment, it is a social setting for these individuals who sometimes are isolated from the community to participate in community activities, to work with others who are in the same circumstance. It's an amazing program. I just hate to see this change in the law that could, at some point in the future, jeopardize its ability to continue to help these unfortunate individuals when they really most need it. So for that reason, I'll continue to oppose the gentleman's amendment.
The gentleman, the 50th, Doug Angelucci.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After the very passionate speech from my friend Delegate Fleischauer last week, I want to do just a little homework. I'm not too familiar with some of these workshops, so I pulled up their 990s from the IRS website, and for 3 of the workshops in north central West Virginia, their executive directors made $69,018, $83,134, and $131,610. So I think asking them to pay their employees minimum wage should not be that difficult to do. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're on equal grounds and we're treating all West Virginians the same. So I support the amendment from my colleague from the 17th and ask you to support it as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman, the 60th, Doug Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please indulge me. I'd like to quote Mr. Budgell from Liberty and Progress. Plain matters of fact are terrible, stubborn things. No matter how you emote, no matter how you speak passionately, no matter how you cast your fury into the heavens, no matter how you rage against the machine, no matter how you legislate, no matter how you vilify your colleagues,
You will not move the implacable laws of physics nor of economics. Our attempts to regulate the intractable laws of physics and economics invariably destroy opportunity. Invariably. The simple fact of the matter is there is so much money available, there are so many people who need it, and if you legislate against the laws of economics in this particular setting, you will actually destroy the opportunities that are being provided through these systems. Please vote this down. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman the first, Doug McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reluctantly have to oppose my good friend, the gentleman from Cabell County's amendment. We've had good discussions on this, and his intentions are very pure. But unfortunately, intentions just aren't enough. They're just not enough. Because as the gentleman from Berkeley County just stated, economic laws are indeed facts of reality, facts of nature. We cannot just decree and legislate away economic laws. That'd be like trying to legislate away the laws of gravity. It just simply does not work. I have one of these shelter workshops in my district. I visited there a couple different times. I submit to you that if we were to adopt the gentleman's amendment, many of these folks, not all, would likely be priced out of the market. Because I just submit to you that you cannot make an individual's labor or productivity worth a given amount by simply making it illegal for anyone to offer them anything less. It's just plain economics, derived from human action. Good intentions aren't enough. Thanks.
The gentleman from the 37th, Doug Pushkin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the first yield?
The gentleman does yield.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Now, did I hear you correctly? You said you cannot put a price on the individual's labor, or you can't mandate what an individual gets paid? Could you repeat that part of it?
Yeah, what I said basically has to do with establishing minimum wage laws above what the market rate establishes.
So you're just against minimum wage altogether?
Well, I'm against price fixing. Are you for price fixing?
I'm just asking, because the argument you made could just be made against establishing a minimum wage that we've had in this country for a very, very long time. So that, I think you're a man of principles, so you're just against that principle of minimum wage altogether?
I'm completely against central planning and price fixing. That's correct.
All right. Well, thank you for your honesty there. Can I briefly speak to the bill?
Proceed.
Yeah, I do support minimum wage. I think that we should look out for workers. I think those laws have been on the books for a very long time. And what we're talking about here is that any human being that's working at least deserves to get minimum wage. And a lot of these, some of these workshops, the goods that they're producing there are being purchased by for-profit companies and sold on the market. The people who create these products at least deserve minimum wage, because they're human beings too.
The gentleman, the 46th, Doug Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to rise in opposition to this amendment. I know the gentleman has good intentions, and I'd like to kind of echo what the chairman of Judiciary had said. You know, we of course have one of these in our districts also, in Buchanan, and a lot of the people that come to this workshop, you know, they're there because it gives them opportunity, it gives them something to do. And going back and talking to our director and some of the folks on the board, you know, they've talked about that they've had to work very closely with these individuals to make sure that their income level does not go over a certain amount. You know, if their income amount goes over a certain level, they'll lose their Social Security, they'll lose their medical card, and I'm not sure if everybody has rest care in their districts, but you know, if you make over a certain amount of income, that you will not qualify for those services anymore. So, you know, if you have the minimum wage, yes, you know, they'll be making more, but they'll work, you know, of course, work less hours. And once they get over that point, it makes it very difficult for them to get very many services at all. So this is something for them to attend to. This is something for them to just be a part of something. And I encourage everybody to go to some of these workshops and watch what they do here. It's just a great program. So this reason I would rise in opposition to the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady at 51st, Dr. Fleshauer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to apologize for losing my temper the other day. The idea that someone who would, the whole notion of sub-minimum wage for a human being just really hurt my feelings. And I think we were all provided with information about the shelters all over the state of West Virginia. There are very few now that don't pay minimum wage. And as I said the other day, we have paid, minimum wage is a fact and has been since the 30s. That is something that ensures people can have enough to live on. And people who are challenged have every need to have a basic income just like everybody else. And I think that there's no reason to make an exception for these individuals who are working, who are performing a service for us. So I urge adoption of the gentleman's amendment, and I apologize if I suggested anything about any of the members. It just hurt my feelings, because I don't want anyone here who has a family member or a friend to have to live in poverty, have to live with their family for the rest of their lives because they are unable to support themselves. These are wonderful organizations. They are truly wonderful organizations, but I think that they should, obviously most of them have figured out how to provide minimum wage for these people, and there are exceptions to the requirements with respect to Social Security. So I really don't think that's a problem. That can be figured out. So I urge adoption.
The gentleman, the 62nd, Nugget Bibby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to the amendment, and I want to have people think about what is it we're trying to do here. What is the minimum wage? None of us here knows what the exact minimum wage is. It's all determined, like my other colleagues have said, there's a market forces. But the dignity of work, that's the most important thing. And people want that dignity, irregardless of what that wage is. There's a lot of folks that would love a job, but they can't get the job because somehow we artificially set what the cost of their labor is, okay? Individuals, I own my labor. You own your own labor. The people out there, they own their labor. That's their product. If they don't give anyone an opportunity, don't take an opportunity away from somebody by forcing the cost of his labor so high that job is no longer there. Okay, so I agree, with the intent of the amendment. It's very well intended. I mean, we all want to pay people as much as we like to make $100 an hour. Okay, but we can't do that. Okay, unfortunately, we have market forces. You can't change the laws of economics. You can't change the laws of physics. So in trying to do that, let's not put people out of work that gives them the dignity that they can get up in the morning and do something that they enjoy doing. And by doing this, we're gonna see a lot of these good institutions, a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of good. They're not going to be able to stay in business anymore, and we're going to lose that. And more importantly, those people that are working and getting up every day with something to do, they're not going to have that anymore. And I urge rejection of the amendment, even though I firmly believe there are good intentions behind it. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 60th, Douglas Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I reject outright the assertion that the assertion of the idea that because I don't emote as plaintively as some other people do, that I'm not passionate, that I don't care about people or anything like that, that's just silly. And let's go ahead and reject that out of hand. I like to keep my personal business out of here, but somehow it keeps ending up coming back in. I have a son who is autistic. He also doesn't speak English, but we're working on that. The thing is that trying to pay Joe $8 an hour to do a job that doesn't produce the value of $8 an hour will actually destroy his opportunity to go into that training program. As the chairman said, these are training programs to help people move forward. This is not a landing spot. This is not how they try to raise a family. This is a training program. And if you shut it down, my son will lose this opportunity. Please shut down this amendment instead. Thank you.
The gentleman, the 55th, Douglas Ponagle.
Will the sponsor of the amendment yield for a couple questions?
Sponsor does yield.
Yes, sir. It's my understanding current law is minimum wage in the state of West Virginia is $8.75. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And right now, you're attempting to change an exemption out for special need individuals to be paid the amount, correct?
That is correct.
So I heard the numbers here a little while ago. The CEOs of these places are getting paid $69,000 to $131,000 a year. And right now, under state law, we can pay these people $1 an hour.
As I understand it, Delegate, there are 89 community rehabilitation programs called CRPs in the state of West Virginia. 81 do in fact pay minimum wage, some better, some like the one closest to my home, better plus benefits. But there are 7 of these facilities in the state of West Virginia that are currently operating under a waiver from the Department of Labor called a 14C that permits them to pay a sub-minimum wage. There's one more, which makes 8, that has a waiver pending. So those 8 facilities, and I believe with a pending waiver you can pay sub-minimum, are currently paying sub-minimum wages in the state of West Virginia.
How much are they paying an hour, do you know?
I believe it varies. I misspoke last week when the delegate from the 27th asked a question about the productivity angle. I do believe part of the process is there's a productivity component that is sent into the Department of Labor, and that component justifies the wage that's paid. The problem with the facility, I believe in Buchanan, was they were fined by the DOL for sending insufficient data in the waiver process. That was 2016. That's part of my problem with it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
The gentleman, 27th, Dr. Schott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just follow up and clarify a couple of things. The section of the code that's sought to be removed only deals with nonprofit sheltered workshops. So it does not affect anyone that's hired who has a physical or mental handicap in any other entity. This is solely a protection, or basically provides flexibility to nonprofit sheltered workshops. It doesn't have anything to do with federal law. It's a state exclusion from the state minimum wage for only those facilities who are taking care of those individuals who are so unfortunate they can't find a job anywhere else due to a physical or mental handicap. These are not sweatshops. These are not sweatshops. These are places that are populated by people who are trying to help these unfortunate individuals to transition into a more productive life. They're also trying to help them with skills of ordinary living, not just the job. The jobs that they perform are not intended to earn a profit. That's not the focus of the job, but rather any money they earn from those activities are intended to underwrite the teaching of the skill. That's the whole purpose of these programs. The more the amount that's paid to these individuals, the less hours they can work. That's just the way that it works because they're on Social Security disability. This is not a survival program for them. It's a supplemental program for them. They already, nearly all of them already have Social Security disability. Social Security disability limits the amount of money that they can earn in any month. That's why most of the ones in the facility in Mercer County are limited to 20 hours a week. Once they raised the minimum wage and paid them the minimum wage, many of them had to work less, and thus they got less benefit from the training that's available. It was a balancing process. So I think this is a very targeted exception for very valuable programs that aren't offered in any other context. Therefore, I think eliminating it is a bad idea. It doesn't mean that they can't pay more than the minimum wage. It just gives them the ability, if they need to pay less than the minimum wage. I urge a rejection of the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman's 60th, Doug Wilson, has been recognized twice on this question. For what purpose does the gentleman now seek recognition? Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, does the gentleman from the 17th wish to close debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the debate. It's been well-intentioned all around, and certainly it's not my intention to cause any worker or their family any trouble, so to say, with the passage of this amendment. That being said, for me it's an issue of equality under the law. Workers in West Virginia should be entitled to earn a minimum wage. There should be no exception simply because you have a severe mental or physical handicap. And there's no other class. If you look down through these exceptions, it's kind of an interesting piece of history from the 30s. Every exception, and there's 19, are particular jobs. Theater ushers, bowling pin chasers. And there's probably some reason in society and economics why we decided it was wise to accept those particular jobs. But there's one that stood out to me, and that is because it is a class of West Virginia workers that have, I mean, this is government-sanctioned wage discrimination based on one thing, and that's who you are. Because you're a worker with a severe handicap, mentally or physically. And so as I look through what's happened in the last 80 years, it's not the first state, 3 states in the last 3 years have taken this on and said that this is the kind of a goal of applying the law equally to our workers, not excluding our workers with disabilities, that truly makes progress. And that's what we should do. So I simply ask for this amendment, Mr. Speaker, that our West Virginia workers with disabilities, they deserve the same protections of our labor laws that every other citizen does. So I'd ask you to support the amendment.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor, roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 46 ayes, 54 nays, less than majority present. Having voted in the affirmative, the amendment is lost. Are there further secondary amendments?
Delegate Robinson moves to amend the amendment. This is HFA Robinson 2-15, number 1.
Does the gentleman from 36, Delegate Robinson, wish to explain the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just like the prior amendment, I seek to strike a designation in this exemption list. This designation is any person 62 years of age or over who receives old age or survivor benefits from Social Security Administration. So basically what I'm trying to do here is to remove the exemption for our residents that are over 62 years old and receive Social Security. So basically this will be our senior citizens. Now, just like last week or the week before, we passed a bill that would exempt Social Security income from the state income tax. But on the other hand, our code that we're going over today also says that they can be paid below minimum wage. Now, as many of us do when we look to try to figure out how we're going to defend an amendment or something like that, I just did a basic search of trying to find an argument for this to be exempt, for senior citizens to be exempt. I couldn't find any. I could find no article or person arguing that senior citizens should be exempt from minimum wage. With that, I went from our surrounding states. We like to compare ourselves to other states, and I looked at Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, and Maryland, none of which exempt senior citizens from the minimum wage. So with that, I would reserve the right to close, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are the members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? If not, the gentleman may close debate.
See no reason to close, Mr. Speaker. I would ask for the ayes and nays.
Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. He did. Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 46 ayes, 56 nays, less than majority present, voted in the affirmative. The amendment is lost. Are there other secondary amendments?
Delegate Robinson moves to amend the amendment. This is HFA Robinson 2-15, number 2.
The gentleman from 36 to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One more try at this. And on this amendment, I've tried to strike, similar as we have in the last two amendments, the individuals employed on part-time basis who are students in any recognized school or college. Like many of you, I worked a part-time job as a student and was paid minimum wage. And unfortunately, this exemption would allow someone to pay you below minimum wage to do that work. Now, in that work, I did things like clean toilets, carry boxes, manual labor, those kind of things. In most cases, I worked harder in that job than I have in many other jobs, and much harder than what we do here on a daily basis. Now, again, we like to compare ourselves with other states. There's only 19 other states across the country that exempt students from minimum wage. The labor force participation for 16 to 24-year-olds in 2003 was at 55%. Now, instead of growing, they're expecting that to go down to 50% in 2020. Now, I think what we're actually trying to do, as we pass workforce education bills and those type things, we're trying to increase the experience level and the work experience of our students. So when they graduate from high school or college or their career and technical education, they have some type of experience. Now, paying them below a minimum wage discourages that. So I would encourage the body to pass this amendment, and again, I would ask the yeas and nays.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the amendment? Yeas and nays have been demanded. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 44 ayes, 55 nays, less than majority present having voted in the affirmative. The amendment is lost. Question before the House is the primary amendment as offered by the Committee on the Judiciary. Are there members who wish to speak to the adoption of the primary amendment? Does the gentleman from 27th wish to close debate on the primary amendment? The gentleman does not. Those in favor of the primary amendment will say aye. Aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. The primary amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments? Bill to be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2439 relating to fire service, equipment, and training funds for volunteer and part volunteer fire companies.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2542 permitting directors of county emergency phone systems to obtain mobile phone emergency lines.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2947 relating generally to telemedicine prescription practice requirements and exceptions.
Are there amendments?
Delegate Staggers moves to amend the bill. This is HFA Staggers 2-14 number 1.
Does the lady from the 32nd, Douglas Staggers, wish to explain the amendment?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker. I've always worried about unintended consequences of simple bills. This bill actually has one sentence in it. And you start off that television doctors can prescribe a controlled substance listed in Schedule 2 of the Uniform Controlled Substance Act. Now, just for information, controlled substances that you all think of are things like fentanyl, OxyContin, Dilaudid, morphine, hydrocodone. But guess what else is in Schedule 2? Methamphetamine, testosterone, Ritalin, amphetamine, topical cocaine. Topical mean placed in the nose or mouth or whatever. So I would like to change that part of the sentence and add opioid Schedule 2, if that makes sense. And that would prohibit television doctors from prescribing cocaine orally or through the nose or whatever, wherever else you take it, a shot of testosterone to make you feel better, some methamphetamine to get you through the day, some Ritalin to make you feel better in a hospital setting. The second problem with this sentence is it says in a hospital, period. A hospital delineated, if anyone in EMS knows this, a hospital is you come to a hospital when you enter the grounds or where the hospital owns the grounds, up to 250 yards from the hospital. That could include all clinics, all areas that belong to the hospital. So it doesn't mean in a hospital while you might imagine laying in 204 waiting for something This could mean outside the hospital, that 250 yards, by federal regulation. So this is a sentence that really wasn't well thought out. And then the third one is to make it in an intensive care setting. In terms of a television doctor prescribing things to you, that would be in an emergency when somebody can't get there, another doctor can't get there. The television doctor would already be on your team because they'd be a West Virginia doctor. They would be part of the team that is taking care of the intensive care patients. They would have all the information known to them right there. And they could decide, does this person need one of two things? Do they need a shot of Dilaudid or fentanyl, or do they need to go to the OR? Do they need to have their ventilator settings changed? In other words, this is a very, very high profile, very intensive care decision where a lot of times you're not going to have a physician or a provider available. The third one is in line 108 to 114 in this same bill that's already in code, that this doesn't prohibit any text or audio orders. In other words, somebody calling something in or texting an order in, the nurse calls and says, this person needs a shot of testosterone, and the doctor can call back and say, yes, I think that's really important, give them a shot of testosterone. Or any order texted or orally called in the hospital in an emergency. So you sort of get this image of a little TV set going from room to room, ordering strange things for strange reasons. I thought that I had done a very nice job by changing that to the prescribing limitations in this subsection do not apply, and I put television physician, but that a physician submits an order to dispense, and I put opioid, not the cocaine and other things, substance listed in Schedule 2 of the Uniform Controlled Substance Acts to a hospital patient for immediate administration in an intensive care setting. So I thought that I did make this more concise, more logical, and if one can ever imagine unintended consequences, we're sure that every doctor is never going to do anything like set up a clinic 250 yards from the hospital and give some oral cocaine to everyone who drives through. But it could, under this sentence. I would like to change the lines 98 to 100 and add my amendment that I think is a little more concise, a little more thought through, and perhaps if we can study this further, it would make sense to me. Let's do a little more study and a little more refinement and eliminate unintended consequences. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 27th, Doug Ellington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak to the amendment. With all due respect to the lady from Raleigh, I'd have to urge rejection of her amendment, and in order for you to understand my rationale for that, you need to understand what the bill is doing. The bill is permitting a physician who is practicing medicine through the use of telemedicine technologies to order a Schedule II drug to a hospital patient for immediate administration in the hospital setting. This is not outside where they're communicating with someone online and doing something like a pill mill. That's what we were trying to prevent. This is in the hospital setting. And the hospital setting can take place either in the emergency department, in the ICU, could be in the OR, it could be in the labor delivery unit, anywhere else in the hospital, not restricted just to the ICU, where the lady's amendment restricts it to. The physician is also required to be licensed in West Virginia, and they also have to be credentialed by the hospital. So that if someone is ordering things carelessly, there is a peer review process within the hospital setting that they can observe that and watch that. So for those reasons, I would recommend rejection of the amendment. The other part is this bill has two parts to it. One is on page 5, where she has her First Amendment, that's for the allopathic MD physicians. The second half is on page 10, which is the osteopathic DO physicians. So unless she wants to start a war between the boards and give the osteopaths a little higher privilege level, I would reject the rejection, or I'd recommend the rejection both based on all of those purposes. Thank you.
The gentleman at 29th, Dr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to start by saying that this was actually a well thought out bill. It came with consultation with our local hospitals in southern West Virginia, and I'm sure that they're similarly situated to a lot of the other folks in this room, being rural health centers and rural hospitals. One of the things with a rural hospital, take from the two gentlemen from the 28th, Summers ARH doesn't have an ICU. So the effect of this bill on the hospital down at Summers ARH would be that it would prevent them from being able to prescribe these drugs through telemedicine. And while we're talking about the TV doctors, these are not TV doctors. They were not on ER or some other George Clooney television program. These are doctors that are employed by and reside at that local facility, but may happen to be in a different part of the facility. And talking to that, actually a good friend of mine is quoted in several medical journals, Dr. Jeff Smith. I went to law school with him, and he was the chief medical officer of Aurora Healthcare in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he implemented this same program back in 2012. He's now the chief medical officer of Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, California. And what they found is that this reduced ER wait time by 75%. It also reduced considerably their left without being seen rate. So if we look at the effect of this in the gentlelady's amendment, how does this apply? You know, one of the things that I looked at, as the gentleman from the 27th mentioned, and I would note that he is a gynecologist and obstetrician, a study from PMC, it was in the March 1st, 2018 Obstetrics and Gynecological Journal, found that more than 1 in 10 Medicaid-enrolled women fill an opioid prescription after a vaginal delivery. So the effect of the gentlelady's amendment would be that the gentleman from the 27th, if he was not in that room at the time, let's look at it, he's delivered the baby, he's in another part of the hospital, and he has a patient that's in extreme pain. Maybe he's off delivering another child. Maybe he's off resting. Maybe he's off doing something else. He would not be able to make that prescription to a woman that he has already seen and already delivered a child from. So that would be limiting a lot of obstetricians in this state in their practice. What this is found to do, telemedicine is found to do, is it attracts physicians to rural healthcare centers. It gives them a lot more flexibility in their scheduling. It reduces the time on their feet a whole lot, and it does a whole lot to attract physicians to these rural facilities. And what this amendment does is it basically makes the bill of no effect. And thinking of other things, like the ER, a lot of the complaints that you hear in rural hospitals is that your ER wait time is too long. And that's where you have the left without being seen rate. So let's imagine that we have a child. A child gets hit in the eye with a stick and is going down to the ER because he's got a laceration on his eye. And this kid is freaking out. He's in a whole lot of pain. And I've got 5 kids. I'm sure people in here know that when you're dealing with your children and they're in a lot of pain and they're panicked, you want to do something real quick to get that under control. So a nurse sees that individual. There's an ER doc there maybe, and he's seeing somebody else. And that nurse needs to prescribe and provide tetracaine hydrochloride to numb that eye very, very quickly, to get that child under control, to get that child out of distress. This amendment would prevent that. And that's the effect that this amendment would have on the bill. So I would urge everybody in here to reject the amendment. This has been utilized in a lot of other states. It has been well thought out. It has been done in consultation with our medical community, and I would ask everybody to vote it down. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 17th, Dr. Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I, too, am going to rise to, unfortunately, speak against my medical colleague's amendment. I've been in medicine long enough that when I went to medical school, and I think this is true for all three of the physicians in this chamber, we didn't have computers. We didn't telemedicine. We didn't have computers. Forget telemedicine. This is a rapidly evolving field. And hospitals know how to deliver health care. And I think to tie this just to the intensive care setting is wrong. Hospitals know what parts of their facilities telemedicine is useful in and what part it's not. So as my fellow physician from the 27th said, these physicians providing the telemedicine will fall under the State Board of Medicine because they have to be licensed, if you'll remember the bill we passed a few years ago. They'll also fall under the credentialing criteria of the hospital. So if the hospital sees fit to allow this in any part of the hospital, I think we're unduly tying the hands, particularly of our rural hospitals that don't have a lot of house staff running around. It's a big difference between being in a teaching hospital with residents in all different disciplines running around all day and night long, as opposed to a small rural hospital, as my friend from Raleigh County just spoke. So therefore, I'm going to call upon the members of this body to reject this amendment, and let's let our hospitals function as they should as hospitals. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does the lady from 32nd wish to close debate on the amendment?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Remember that everyone who's in the hospital has an admitting physician. That admitting physician should have, and I hope you all have had this experience, done a complete history and physical on you, be aware of your familial status, be aware of your social status, be aware of any other things that may impact you. So you're now in room 214, and you can get in touch with either the doctor that admitted you or whoever's on call for them, and they can call in. These are the Schedule II drugs again. Again, I'm very worried about that line that allows testosterone, topical cocaine, methamphetamine to be called in by a TV doctor that is part of the team, but not part of the cross coverage. So you've got doctors on call. So if my esteemed colleague, the Chair of Health, has delivered someone and forgotten to give her a prescription for narcotics, certainly whoever is now on call would write the prescription for her because that's the protocol. So in the emergency department, tetracaine to the eye, number one, tetracaine is not a controlled substance. Number two, the ER nurses may ask me, but they usually just go ahead because they know me and put the tetracaine in the eye, because the very first mission of any healthcare provider is to provide pain relief, to help you get through whatever you're going through. So I don't think anyone's ever worked with me that would have to talk to a TV to ask for tetracaine to the eye to relieve the pain. There is, if we pass my amendment, which I ask please, this is going to go to the Senate and you'd have a little bit more time to think about it, or this should be resubmitted as a separate bill, because the first part of this bill was to allow for emergencies that needed it really, in life or death situations, needed evaluations maybe before any other doctor could ever get there, by someone who could really evaluate the patient. So what I'm asking is, do a little more study on this, change the wording a little bit from just Schedule II to change the locations in a brick and mortar hospital setting, and send this to the Senate. They can change it, or we can study it and resubmit it as a separate bill. I'm calling for the yeas and nays, please.
The question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. The roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand. The demand is not sustained. You count. One more time. Is the demand sustained? Demand is sustained. Question before the House is the adoption of the amendment. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, 19 ayes, 80 nays, 1 member absent, not voting, less than a majority present having voted in the affirmative. Chair declares the amendment lost. Are there further amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2958, authorizing the state auditor to conduct regular financial examinations or audits of all volunteer fire companies.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there further bills on second reading? If not, the lady from the 49th for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, the House will recess until 4 p.m. today.
Lady from the 49th moves that subject to announcements. The House stand in recess until 4 p.m. today. Are there announcements? The gentleman from the 28th, Douglas Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have 2 announcements today, first of which will be Republican members of this House will caucus here in the chamber. We will begin in 30 minutes. That is 1:15 p.m. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, Republican members of the Committee on Government Organization will caucus at 4 p.m. in the chairman's office. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
He just announced the floor.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. Government organization will not caucus at 3 o'clock. We will caucus in the chairman's office at 3 o'clock.
The gentleman from the 10th, Doug Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 2 p.m. and tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to take up legislation. The agenda will be posted. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 35th, Doug Capito.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Committee on the Judiciary will meet and resume the posted agenda in the committee room this afternoon at 2:30. Republican members of the Judiciary Committee will meet at 2:20 in the chairman's office. And tomorrow, on Tuesday, the committee will meet at 9:30 a.m. in the committee room, and the agenda will be posted.
Gentleman from the 41st, Doug Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in room 215E. Republicans will caucus at 1:30 in the chairman's office.
Gentleman from the 10th, Doug Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy will meet tomorrow in the Judiciary Committee room at 2 p.m. Republican members will meet in the chairman's office at 1:30. The agenda will be posted.
The gentleman 21st, Doug Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will resume today's agenda at 2:30 in the Education Committee room. Also, Mr. Speaker, we will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the Education Committee room. The agenda will be posted for that meeting. And lastly, LOSIA will meet at 5 p.m. tomorrow in the Senate Finance Committee room.
The gentleman of the 16th, Doug Linville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your subcommittee of the Technology and Infrastructure Committee will now meet following this evening's floor session. The agenda will be posted, and that will be in government organization. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 51st, Doug Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democratic members of the Energy Committee will caucus tomorrow at 1:30 in Delegate Evans' office.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is, ladies, motion that the House stand in recess until 4 p.m. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. Ayes have it. The House is in recess until 4 p.m.
The Senate will please come to order. The Senate will please come to order. All those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. And with those on the floor and our guests in the gallery, please rise as we are led in prayer this morning by Pastor Caleb Villers. He's the youth pastor at Summersville Baptist Church in Summersville, West Virginia. And then please remain standing as we are led in the pledge this morning by the senator from Monongalia, Pastor Villers.
Let us pray. Great God, first and foremost, I want to thank you for each person you have placed in this room today. They have been placed in a position that often comes with pain, heartache, and despair. But Lord, I pray that you would bring peace to those who may be struggling, love to those who may be hurting, and guidance to those who may feel lost. May we all remember that it is not just by our will, but yours that we are here. I pray that you would be on the hearts and minds of the decision makers today, that their decisions would be ones that please you above all else, that their decisions would be ones that bring glory to you and your people. May we remember your Son, Jesus. May we remember the love that he gave, the love that we should share with everyone. And Lord, help us to remember and pray the same prayer Jesus prayed on the night he was betrayed. Not my will, Lord, but yours be done. Not our will, Lord, but yours be done. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. The Senator from Monongalia County.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the guests in our gallery, please join us this morning as we show our respect for our great nation. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Thank you. You may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, February 15th, 2019. The Senate met
The
at
Senator from
11:08.
Raleigh County requests unanimous consent that further reading of the Journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guests. Introduction of guests. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome our honorary pages for the day. Some of them are in the back of the room, others are in the front. Please stand as your name is called and be recognized. As guest of the Senator from Pleasants County, we have Jet Nestor and Louise Godnow. As guest of the Senior Senator from the 8th, Kate Cruikshank and Lindsley Allman. As guest is the Senator from Tucker, we have Stephanie Santilli and Nicole Schumacher. As guest of the Senator from Jefferson, Britt Shodell, Jessica Shodell, Teresa Rucker, Xavier Rucker. As guest of the Senior Senator from the 16th, Andrew Overly. And as guest of the Senior Senator from the 17th, Alex King and Isaac Risk. Again, some are in the back, some are in the front. Please give them a warm Senate welcome. Thank you. You may be seated. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure and yours to introduce our doc for the day. In the rear of the chamber, we have Dr. Dana King. If you wouldn't mind standing, he's traveled down from WVU, Morgantown, and is the chair of the Department of Family Medicine up there. If the Senate would give him a warm welcome.
The Senator from Nicholas County.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is my pleasure and my fellow senator from Upshur to introduce the wife of our pastor of the day, Caleb Billers. His wife and his mother-in-law are sitting in the rear of the President's Gallery, Macy and Lucinda Euler. If they would please rise, and if the Senate please would extend a very warm welcome.
Senator from Pleasants County.
Mr. President, I have several introductions. First, the mother and grandmother of our page, Jet Nestor, would be Alice Nestor and grandmother Kathy Hawkins. And then the same area, I think they're in the back, Scott Goodman, father, and Elizabeth Goodnow, mother of Lewis Goodnow. Would they stand, please, and be welcome? Also in the gallery to my right is Eric Crossman, principal of Belmont Elementary in Pleasants County and adjunct professor of education at WVU Parkersburg. And with him is Jody Johnson, early childhood assistant teacher for kindergarten at Belmont Elementary and president of the Pleasants County School Service Personnel Association. Make them welcome, please. And then to the gallery to my left in the red jackets is the West Virginia Republican women. Would you make them welcome, please?
The Senior Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think in all the galleries we have a lot of black shirts up there. That's the West Virginia Citizens Defense League, who I happen to be good friends with all of them. Got my tie on here today for that matter. Would they all please and stand and the Senate make them welcome?
Senator from Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the parents of some of our pages with Britt and Jessica Shodell. John and Deborah Shodell should be in the rear gallery. There they are. And obviously, the person bringing my two children who are paging today, my husband of 21 years, James Rucker, also.
The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the North Gallery, we're pleased on your behalf to observe and introduce. We have two sitting circuit judges here today, Anita Ashley from Rome County and Bridget Coey from the 23rd Judicial Circuit. I ask the Senate to make them both welcome.
The senator from Brooke County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I may be a little biased, but today we're lucky to be joined by the most beautiful woman in the state of West Virginia, my wife, Alex Weld. If she could stand, the Senate make her feel welcome.
The senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my pleasure and the pleasure from the senator from Monongalia to introduce my good friend Jeff Smith, who's in the South Gallery. He accompanied the Fairmont Senior High School football team down today. If the Senate would make him welcome.
The junior senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President. I'd like to, on your behalf and on behalf of the senior senator from the 8th District, I'd like to introduce my wife, Allison Cook. She's with both my boys, Patrick and Richie. Allison is a PEA at Cabin Creek Health Systems, and she drew the short straw, and she had to take the boys to the dentist's office today. They're both smiling, but if the Senate can make them feel welcome, I'd appreciate it.
Further into the senior senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator from Jefferson and I are pleased to have the parents of Andrew, who's our honorary page here today, Ken and Joan Overly, if they would stand and receive a warm Senate welcome.
Junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the theme of introductions of spouses, I have spotted another, not mine, but the spouse of Senator Bozo, I believe, is in the audience, Debbie, and I've met with her, and I think she should certainly be stood and recognized, and let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
The senior senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your behalf and my junior senator from the 8th's behalf, one of our pages, we have a parent here today. Her name is Linda Cruikshank. If she would stand and the Senate make her welcome, please.
Further, senator from Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your behalf, today there are a lot of members here for the pro-life rally that will be taking place later on. And I would just like those who came here to support the West Virginians for Life rally, would you please stand up and may the Senate make you feel welcome. And thank you.
Are there further introductions? The senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of myself, my co-senator from 14th, and the junior and senior senator from the 12th, I want to introduce a parent of our page today, Stephanie, and it's her mom and dad, Annette and Sam Centelli. They're in the back getting ready for a resolution, but if the members would make them welcome.
Are there further introductions? Further introductions? The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we stand in brief recess to hear an address from the students from the Governor's Academy.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of hearing addresses by the students of the Governor's Honor Academy. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in brief recess to hear an address. Please welcome to our podium Bhairavi Sanundram, who represents the Governor's Honor Academy and is a senior at Parkersburg High School. Let's give her our attention.
President Carmichael, honored members of the State Senate, guests, and friends, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today as a representative of the West Virginia Governor's Honors Academy class of 2018. The educational opportunities throughout our state are simply not equal. And there are many pockets where even the brightest students who, simply because of where they live, are not given access to high-quality instruction that is found in more affluent areas with a more highly educated populace. A program that I would like to talk about to you today is the Governor's Honors Academy, which gives great-minded students a myriad of intellectually challenging and intriguing feats, no matter where they live. Each GHA student comes from schools stretching across the state, and I speak for every single one of us when I say that we had no idea we would make so many new faces and make so many new personal connections. Saying that we were a family by the end of our time at GHA is simply an understatement. The overwhelming camaraderie that we created gave us a sense of unity that we scarcely felt in our own towns and communities. All of us have individual aspirations, and regardless of what these may be, the Governor's Honors Academy gave us the notion of moving on and pursuing whatever we choose with every intention of coming back and making this state proud. The sheer appreciation I was able to further gain for this state stemmed from the Governor's Honors Academy because I saw a new part of the state that is often shielded from my worldview. I saw students who were just as eager to learn and as open-minded to new ideas as I was. This is something I don't see much as I would hope in my daily academic life, but when I was surrounded by the hundreds of students in my GHA class, every single day of that 3 weeks was a new experience, and that only allowed me to further gain an appreciation for this state. This is because I could see the sheer potential of every single one of us. Creating an environment in which honors students from across the state have the opportunity to communicate, collaborate, and learn from one another is a favorable option in terms of major growth for the overall educational capability of our great state. To continue funding such a program that leaves a tremendous impact on the bright young individuals of our state is but a minute contribution to continue improving our educational standards. Through continued funding, you are not only providing students of the following year to indulge in such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but you are funding the engineers, doctors, lawyers, politicians, and leaders of this state and even the world in the future. Education is something that one will never be able to put a price on, and that is because the concept of knowledge is endless and forever growing. And to give the students of the state the ability to further engage their intellectual interests is an investment that is never going to wrongly be made. Thank you again for your continued support of the Governor's Honors Schools for the past 35 years. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you today. And thank you for helping the Governor's Honors Academy mantra truly become a reality. GHA forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sundaram. That was excellent. Thank you very much. Next, we will hear from Connor Rush, who represents his peers at the Governor's School for the Arts. He is from Barrickville in Marion County and is a junior at Fairmont Senior High. Mr. Rush.
President Carmichael, esteemed members of the Senate, and honored guests, it's an honor to speak here with you today. My name is Connor Rush of Barrickville, West Virginia. The Governor's School for the Arts was one of the most prolific, impactful, and amazing experiences of my lifetime. Nowhere else have I ever been surrounded by so many like-minded individuals who are just as open about the arts as I am. Nowhere else have I learned as much about my passions and career paths. Nowhere have I gained so much confidence in the quality of the work that I love to do. This is for the sole reason that there is nowhere like GSA. First of all, I've been able to hone my craft in almost all aspects of what I do. I attended the Governor's School for the Arts as a digital arts student under the instruction of Daniel Dean. I've learned more about not only the use of computers and other technologies in art, but what the definition of art means. Art is anything that you're passionate about, any action or any product that you create and take pride in, anything that says something about you that you can't say with words alone. That is art. While attending this 3-week event, I learned both new skills and improved old ones. I've directed and edited film before, but never have I had such mentorship and such resources to do so. I also never even thought about the programming and coding of images, but while attending GSA, I learned how to take existing art forms and through their programming, turn them into something completely new. This has helped further my already existing interest in computer science. I come from a background of video game development and programming, which I found a whole new confidence for while attending GSA. I've always had doubts in my skills in not only programming, but in all other artistic endeavors as well. I've questioned how to apply these skills into a professional career. But being around other artists in an opening and accepting environment helped me gain confidence in myself and my abilities and my chosen career paths. I believe that GSA has helped me grow into a better version of myself entirely. Since then, I've published 2 successful video games and currently am preparing to release a full-length album. But most importantly, I've developed what I consider to be an invaluable network. A network of not only incredible friends, but one of professional collaborators. A network that promotes expression, innovation, and application. A network that will last into college and far beyond. Thank you for giving me time to tell my story and express why I feel the Governor's programs are so vital to the education and development of students like myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. It was a great address. Thank you very much. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of House Bill 2472, providing a special license plate for pollinators.
Message will be received and referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2538, providing banking services for medical cannabis.
Message be received and referred to Committee on the Judiciary.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2579 relating to the collection of tax and the priority of distribution of an estate or property in receivership.
Message be received, referred to Committee on Judiciary, and then to the Committee on Finance.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2618, including undue influence as a factor in the definition of financial exploitation of an elderly person or protected person.
Message be received and referred to Committee on the Judiciary.
House Bill 2716, relating to motorboat lighting and equipment requirements.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Natural Resources.
House Bill 2846, designating a Back the Blue plate in support of law enforcement personnel.
Message be received and referred to Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure.
House Bill 2992, relating to governmental websites.
Message be received, referred to Committee on Government Organization with a second reference to Committee on Finance.
The Clerk of the House announced the adoption by that body of the following resolutions naming bridges and highways: House Concurrent Resolution 2, House Concurrent Resolution 4, Committee Substitute for House Concurrent Resolution 7, Committee Substitute for House Concurrent Resolution 11, House Concurrent Resolution 19, House Concurrent Resolution 23, Committee Substitute for House Concurrent Resolution 26, House Concurrent Resolution 43, and House Concurrent Resolution 44.
Resolutions will be received and referred to the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Are there further communications from the House?
No, sir.
Communications from the Executive?
There are none.
Reports from standing committees?
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 340, repealing obsolete provisions of code relating to West Virginia Physicians Mutual Insurance Company, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 402, authorizing Division of Forestry to investigate and enforce timber theft violations, and reports back to Committee Substitute for same, with the recommendation that the Committee Substitute for Committee Substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 510 relating to medical professional liability, and reports back to Committee Substitute for same, with the recommendation that the Committee Substitute for Committee Substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration Senate Bill 522, creating Special Road Repair Fund, and reports back to Committee Substitute for same, with the recommendation that the Committee Substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Charles H. Clements, Chair.
Report will be received. Under the bill's original double committee reference will be referred to Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration engrossed Committee Substitute for House Bill 2083, providing an identification card for released inmates who do not have a West Virginia identification card or driver's license, and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
That's all I have, sir.
Reports from select committees?
There are none.
Introduction of bills. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill number 637 through Senate Bill 663 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
The junior senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill number 637 through Senate Bill 663 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 36 by Senators Maroney and Jeffries naming the U.S. Army Corporal Corey M. Hewitt Memorial Bridge.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over 1 day.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 37 by Senators Takubo, Stallings, Jeffries, and Prezioso urging Bureau for Public Health designate Alzheimer's disease and other dementias as public health issue.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over 1 day.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 38 by Senators Plymel, Baldwin, Klein, Maynard, Wolfle, Jeffries, Lindsay, Stallings, and Roberts urging CSX support New River train.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over 1 day.
Senate Resolution 48 by Senators Smith, Jeffries, Lindsay, Stallings, Swope, and Maroney designating February 18th, 2019 as Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day.
Senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dismissed with, and the resolution be put up on its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 48 designating February 18th, 2019 as Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day at the Capitol.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The senator from Tucker County.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 2019, an estimated 56,770 people will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in the United States, and 45,750 will die from the disease. Pancreatic cancer is one of the deadliest cancers. It's currently the third leading cause of cancer deaths in the United States and is projected to become the second leading cause around 2020. Pancreatic cancer is one of the deadliest cancers with a 5-year relative survival rate in the single digits at just 9%. 73% of pancreatic cancer patients die within the first year of being diagnosed, while 91% of the patients die within the first 5 years. Approximately 300 deaths will occur in West Virginia in 2019 alone. One of the less than 20% of patients diagnosed with pancreatic cancer who was able to have the Whipple surgery is our own John Holmberg, who is a current bill drafter for the West Virginia Legislature and retired as the Director of Legislative Services in 2014. While overall cancer incidence and cancer deaths are declining, the incidence of pancreatic cancer and death rate for pancreatic cancer patients have been increasing. The number of new pancreatic cancer incidents have been increasing and is projected to increase by 55% by the year 2030. Mr. President, I urge passage of this resolution.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the remarks by the senator from Tucker County be placed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? The chair hears none, so ordered. Junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in brief recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Further resolutions.
Senate Resolution 49 by Senators Rucker, Jeffries, Lindsay, Stallings, and Swope, designating February 18th, 2019 as Advanced Technology Center Day.
The senator from Jefferson County.
Sorry, Mr. President. Thank you. I request unanimous oh, gosh.
I got it. The senator from Jefferson County requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and that the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will please read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 49, designating February 18th, 2019 as Advanced Technology Center Day at the Legislature.
Question for the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The senator from Jefferson County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today some of West Virginia's brightest innovators from Bridge Valley Community and Technical College and Pierpont Community and Technical College are here demonstrating their amazing work. Bridge Valley and Pierpont are teaching the next generation of tech innovators and preparing them for success in today's competitive tech industry. These two institutions are providing students with cutting-edge technology in the classroom, excellent career development, and getting them ready to compete in the 21st century. Thanks to the outstanding staff, faculty, administration of these two institutions, West Virginia is being redefined as a tech center. I am proud to stand and share my support on Advanced Technology Center Day. And I just want to point out, this is one of the many things that we're hoping to expand with Senate Bill 1, and I hope that that's going to get passed out of the other house. Thank you, Mr. President. I urge passage of this resolution.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? Not. Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the comments made by the junior senator from the 16th be placed in the appendix of the journal.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting the resolution.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in brief recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Further resolutions?
Yes, sir. Senate Resolution 50 by Senators Prezioso, Jeffries, Lindsay, Stallings, Swope, and Maroney, congratulating the Fairmont Senior High School football team for winning the 2018 Class AA State Football Championship.
The Senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, put upon its passage, the committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be put upon its passage.
Senator from Marion County requests unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and that the resolution be placed upon its adoption. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk will please read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 50, congratulating the Fairmont Senior High School football team for winning the 2018 Class AA State Football Championship.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? The Senator from Marion County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Fairmont Senior High School has a rich and storied history of academic and athletic accomplishments. Today it's my honor to introduce you to the Fairmont Senior High School 2018 Class AA State Champions. This was truly an amazing season. This Fairmont Senior High School football team had a 14-0 season record. They beat Weir, my colleague from Hancock, in the semifinals, Bluefield in the finals. Not only was their record pristine, statistics they recorded were astonishing. Fairmont Senior High School won by an average of 50 points per game. 50 points per game. They only gave up an average of 10 points per game. What's more amazing, they've never trailed in any quarter throughout the entire season. Their offense scored 696 points and totaled 6,287 yards. Fairmont Senior High School senior class is the winningest in school history with an overall record of 46-8, which included 1 state championship, 2 conference championships, 3 championship game appearances, 1 semifinal appearances, and back-to-back Big Ten champions. This senior class had 5 players continuing their college careers, and I would like for the individual to step forward. Quarterback Connor Neal set the school career and season records for completion percentage, yards, and TD passes. He is also the 2018 Kennedy Award winner, Mr. West Virginia Football. Brothers Elijah and Xavier Posey tied the school record for interceptions with 6 each. Xavier Posey set the school record for punt returns. He returned 3 punt returns for touchdowns. Place kicker Frank Smith couldn't be with us today, but he set the single school record for most points by a kicker, most extra points attempted and made, and most field goals made. The team had 4 all-state selections: Connor Neal, Red Heston, Elijah Posey, and Zach Frazier. 4 all-state selections. They also had 10 conference selections: Connor Neal, Red Heston, Elijah Posey, Xavier Posey, Magnus Sheets, Jake Pittman, just happens to be my neighbor. Where's Jake? J.D. Smith, Zach Frazier, Nat Kowalski, and Dom Owens. This Fairmont Senior High School football team is led by Coach Nick Barty. Where is Nick? Step up here. Nick was selected the 2018 Big Ten Conference Coach of the Year, has been coaching for 12 seasons, 2 of which he's head coach, and his head coaching record is an overall coaching record of 26-2. I'm going to take a little bit of executive privilege here. Nick comes from a rich football history. His father, Martin Sonny Barty, is with us today, and Martin was on the NAIA 1967 Fairmont State national champions. Martin is truly an All-American. I don't know if any of the assistant coaches are here today, but I would like to name them for all the hard work that they did. They are Mike Manella, Mark Sampson, Tyler Phillips, Adam Pethel, Donnie Retton, Paul Kettering, Gino Guerrera, Vincent Delegati, Nick Hedrick, Troy Bigelow, and Ben Taylor. Ladies and gentlemen, this Fairmont Senior High School football team is a shining example to all West Virginians what can be done, what can be accomplished with dedication, commitment, and teamwork. It's sincerely my privilege to introduce to you the 2018 Class AA State Football Champions, the Fairmont Senior High School Polar Bears. Mr. President, I urge the passage of this resolution.
Is there further discussion? The senator from Brooke County.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I would never oppose one of these resolutions, but I may have to stay neutral. My stepfather is the coach of Weir High, who this team, I think we'll call it steamrolled in the semifinals, 59-0 back in November. But my stepfather did pay you guys the highest compliment and said that he's been coaching since the 70s and said that you guys are the toughest team that he's ever coached against. Played you twice and you beat him twice, once in the regular season, once in the playoffs. So congratulations, guys. It's really an honor to have you guys here with us.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion? Not the question before the Senate is adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this leaves little doubt that they just make them faster, meaner, tougher, more talented than they used to. But for those reasons, I'd like to also request unanimous consent that the comments made by our senators from Marion and Brooke be placed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection, so ordered. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the Senate stand in brief recess for the purpose of presenting this resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate in recess to present this resolution. Senate will please come to order. Senate will please come to order. Are there further resolutions?
No, sir.
Motions? Petitions?
There are none.
Unfinished business?
Committee substitute for Senate Concurrent Resolution 25, naming the U.S. Army Private First Class Andrew Bo Martin Harper Memorial Bridge.
Question for the Senate is adoption of resolution. Is there discussion? Not. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the resolution adopted. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 35, designating days for displaying honor and remember flag at West Virginia Veterans Memorial.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Military. Is there further unfinished business?
No, sir.
Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 259, expanding coyote control program. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 259 expands the coyote control program. This is a bill that we passed last year. I believe it was unanimously, and we're giving it another shot. Currently, and for the past couple decades, I think, there's been a coyote control program whereby owners of breeding age sheep and goats would put $1 into a fund, and that would be used to trap and snare these coyotes, which are detrimental to the herds. This simply allows a program to be expanded to breeding age cows, and it's completely voluntary. And if an individual would like to participate in it, they can make that donation. If they don't want to participate, that's perfectly fine also. That being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions there may be, and otherwise I urge a passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 266, creating Intermediate Court of Appeals and West Virginia Appellate Review Organization Act of 2019. Third reading of the bill.
The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 266 would create the Intermediate Appellate Court Review West Virginia Appellate Review Reorganization Act of 2019. The bill amends 6 existing sections of the code, and they're scattered throughout, one in the Elections Code, one in the Workers' Comp Code, there are a couple in the Administrative Procedures Code, and there's a section in the Appellate Review chapter. But the gravamen of the bill is the creation of a new article in the state code, and it would be designated as Article 11 of Chapter 51, and it would be the West Virginia Appellate Review Reorganization Act of 2019. This bill creates an Intermediate Court of Appeals. In the new article, there are a total of 13 sections. I'm going to work through them briefly. I'll try to do it briefly. I know every member of the Senate has had a look at it in one or the other of 2 committees. It's been through Judiciary and through Finance, so that should mean everyone in the Senate has seen it. Article 1, Section 1 is a short title. Short title for the Act, the West Virginia Appellate Review Reorganization Act of 2019. Section 2 of that article contains principally focusing on the provisions of Article 8 of the state constitution, which expressly allow and permit the legislature to create an intermediate appellate court. Section 3, definition of terms used in the article. Section 4 creates an intermediate appellate court. And under this bill, it would come into existence as of July 1st, 2020. And Section 5 defines and prescribes the jurisdiction of such a court. Mr. President, that section provides that it would have the Intermediate Appellate Court would have no original jurisdiction for cases, but only appellate jurisdiction, and it would field and receive and decide appeals from final judgments, orders of the circuit court entered in civil cases after June 30th, 2020, final judgments, orders, decisions of an agency or administrative law judge entered after June 30th, 2020, final judgments and orders of the Workers' Compensation Board of Review after June 30th, 2020, and final judgment and orders of the Circuit Court concerning guardianship or conservatorship proceedings under Chapter 44A of the Code. There are exclusions from jurisdiction. They're listed in subsection C of Section 5, and the exclusions from jurisdiction that are delineated there are judgments or orders issued in any criminal case. So criminal cases stay on their current path. They go directly for appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeals. Judgments and orders of a family court, judgments and orders from juvenile proceedings, juvenile delinquency proceedings, judgments and orders in child abuse and neglect proceedings. So all those cases or species of cases retain their current path. Their appeal is directly to the Supreme Court, not through or to an intermediate appellate court. Same with orders of commitment, civil commitment proceedings, mental hygiene proceedings where people have to be committed involuntarily, final decisions of the Public Service Commission, and election challenges. Interlocutory appeals are carved out from the Intermediate Appellate Court. They would have no jurisdiction or authority to handle an interlocutory appeal, nor do they have jurisdiction over certified questions under our laws that delineate the process for presenting certified questions to a court, and we exclude jurisdiction over any extraordinary remedies. So that's habeas corpus, quo warranto, mandamus, prohibition. Those cases are left to, with the direct appeal being to the Supreme Court. Section 6 of the bill delineates the qualifications of judges who would serve on such a court. They have to be in good standing with the state bar. They have to be admitted to practice for 10 years. They have to be 5-year residents of the state of West Virginia. That, of course, is a constitutional requirement. And they are not permitted to engage in the practice of law while they're serving as a judge of an intermediate court of appeals. Section 7 delineates how the court would be constituted. So the bill calls for gubernatorial appointments, lawyers appointed by the governor with the advice and consent of the Senate. Confirmation of the Senate. The terms of office are 10-year terms. They're appointed on a staggered basis initially. There are provisions in the bill that require the utilization of the Judicial Vacancy Advisory Commission for the appointment process, and the bill allows judges of an intermediate court to be reappointed upon the expiration of a term. There's a prohibition in here that says that any judge of the Intermediate Appellate Court may not retain his or her office, if he or she becomes a candidate for any other office of any kind, judicial or non-judicial. You become a candidate for office, you leave the bench. Section 8 calls for the promulgation, adoption of rules. Those would be under the control and authority of the Supreme Court of Appeals. Section 9 relates to the administration of the court, where filings would occur, where the court would sit. It places this court, as the Constitution requires, under the supervisory control of the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. Section 9 also talks about staff. Section 10 delineates the requiring of some reporting of judicial information. Section 11 requires written opinions, provides that they're to be given precedential effect, be binding upon the courts below the Intermediate Court of Appeals until such time as they are overruled or modified by the Supreme Court. It provides for Section 12 discretionary review by the Supreme Court of decisions of the Intermediate Court of Appeals. Section 13 addresses compensation. There would be 3 judges. I should have said that earlier. It's a single panel, 3 judges of an Intermediate Court of Appeals. Under Section 13, they would be paid annual salaries of $130,000 and be eligible to be reimbursed for their actual expenses and duties of their office. Mr. President, I'd be happy to answer questions if there are any. Otherwise, I would like to reserve the right to close debate, but otherwise urge passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion. The senator from Harrison County.
Thank you, Mr. President. With all due respect to my friend from Morgan, I strongly oppose this bill. And, you know, we've been through this 5 times. It's the 5th time, I believe, that we've tried to pass this bill. Certainly have had it over the last several years. But you know, the amazing thing is there has not been a single reason that anybody has gotten up and testified to or espoused for the creation of this new layer of government, this new court. I've heard many times we need this court to broaden the scope of jurisprudence. Now, as a lawyer, I kind of know what that means, but I know the rest of you are going to have a hard time with that, those that aren't in the practice of law. But here's all you got to remember. There were 1,200 appeals last year, 1,158 to be exact, 1,158 appeals. There were 1,158 opinions. If we create this court and it was in effect in 2018, there would have been 1,158 appeals and there would have been 1,158 opinions. Same scope of jurisprudence, except now we're going to create a court that can't give a final decision, that isn't the final word in the state of West Virginia, because it's still got to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, how can you expand jurisprudence when you can't expand the number of appeals? It just doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? Even the federal courts will not look to the Intermediate Court of Appeals opinions as precedent. We will, because of the statute we're creating. But in reality, anytime there's new law to be made, it's got to go to the West Virginia Supreme Court. West Virginia Supreme Court will take those cases. Anytime there isn't new law being made, the Intermediate Court will issue a decision, like the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals does right now. Without this new layer of government, without the millions of dollars you're about to spend. Now, don't have any doubt, because I've seen every one of you stand up and rail against the expansion of government, rail against the waste of tax dollars. That's exactly what this is. And the fiscal note, which started out at $18 million, and now it's worked its way down over 5 years. I think it's $4 million and some change now. Doesn't even include the extra staff time at the West Virginia DEP, at the DHHR, at the Attorney General's office, just to name a few that'll be necessary to address 2 layers of appeal. Millions of more dollars every time that appeal goes from the Intermediate Court to the Supreme Court of Appeals. Why would we do that? Why would we create that? Even if they don't have attorneys involved, the staff's going to be involved to educate and bring up to speed the attorneys that are handling the appeal. And think about the evidence we've had over the years. Appeals in 1999 in the West Virginia Supreme Court were 3,600. 3,600. And you just heard me say the number of appeals last year was 1,158. We have a decrease of 2/3, but we're going to create this new layer of government. this new layer, this new sucking of our citizens' tax money when last year we couldn't pay attention. I don't think we're going to be able to do a lot this year when you add up everything we've given away. Every appeal in West Virginia gets a decision. Every appeal gets a written decision from the court. That is all anybody can ask when they're appealing something. And when you think about the evidence that's coming into this body over the last few years, you'll remember that we had an interim meeting where the Supreme Court Justice of the state of Nevada appeared by video conference. And he was all for intermediate courts of appeals until we ran down the facts of what happens in West Virginia, that every case, every appeal gets an opinion, that there's no backlog. And we heard Justice, gosh darn it.
Jenkins.
Yes, Justice Jenkins get up and say not only was there no backlog, but they had already completed the backlog that was created by the impeachment hearings last session. But the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Nevada heard those facts and concluded before all of us that West Virginia did not need an intermediate court of appeals. Now, 9 other states, there's only 9 other states that don't have an intermediate court of appeals. But you know what? They all have less than 2 million in population. Now, we may be the highest of those at 1.8 million, but they're close. Soon to be 10, because North Dakota, that did exactly what we're about to do, is about to sunset their intermediate court of appeals because they figured out that it's a waste of tax dollars, it's a waste of time. So who benefits from this? Well, think about what it's going to do. It's going to add months, if not years, to every appeal that ends up going to the Supreme Court of Appeals. It's going to add millions upon millions of dollars in additional litigation costs for all the cases. The gentleman from Morgan, Senator from Morgan, said they're going to go to the Intermediate Supreme Court of Appeals. It's going to make lawyers a lot more money. That is one good benefit out of this for those of us that are lawyers. It's going to make lawyers a lot more money. It's going to cost our small businesses a lot more money. It's going to cost our individual folks who are out there who are injured or cheated or anything else a lot more money and a lot more time. So why would anybody do this? Who would advocate for this? Big insurance. They benefit from delay. Big out-of-state corporations. Anybody who's financially well-heeled and can afford to pay the additional attorney's fees so that individuals suffer, so that individuals are discouraged, so that small businesses are discouraged from sticking up to their rights. I've heard all my friends on the other side of the aisle say it, and remember, you're betraying your pledge of smaller government. You're betraying your pledge of lower taxes, not wasting taxes. Because a yes vote for the Intermediate Court of Appeals is a breaking of both of those pledges. It's a broken promise. A no vote keeps your promise. To the landowners and mineral owners in this state who are now going to get pushed down and punished by big oil and gas companies for trying to stand up for their rights. By the people who are cheated by insurance companies and have to turn to the courts to get a fair shake to get their house repaired or to have their automobile repaired. Mr. President, I urge everybody to vote no on this bill.
Further discussion. Further discussion. Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I had a whole bunch here that the Senator from Harrison County had already talked about, so I won't go over the same territory, but I will say this, that in the short time I've been part of this chamber, we've talked about things that deserve our attention. Our roads, we've passed resolutions on infrastructure. We heard about Randy's dream and Jim's dream. We don't need this. We don't need an intermediate court. We need it as much as we need another hole in our head. Period. When we heard testimony on Judiciary Committee from the proponents of this bill, they could not give a reason for it other than to say, well, we just add another number of ayes, we'll get a fairer resolution. Well, why not pack the Supreme Court then if that's the case? That doesn't make any sense because by the time a case gets to the Supreme Court today, at least 6 judges have taken a look at it, maybe 7 depending upon whether or not it originated on the magistrate level. No, there is no reason, no good reason for this. You know, I spent a lot of time going door to door talking to folks before I came here. Thousands of folks. And the first question I asked them, what would you like to see your government do? Do you know how many people said we need an intermediate court? Zero. Zero. And that's because it's not essential for us. We don't need this. It just adds another layer of money in government for our system of government. And then finally, I'm just going to leave with this statement that I know everyone in this chamber has heard, but I want you to feel it. Justice delayed is justice denied. That means our friends and neighbors who are surface owners, injured folks, small businesses, you can tack on another 2 years of litigation on their particular claims. And they are our friends. They are our neighbors. They're the people we see at the grocery store and with the people we see at church. They're the ones that are hurt by this bill. And for that, for those reasons, Mr. President, I ask and urge that this chamber vote against SB 266. Thank you.
Is further discussion before I recognize Senator from Morgan to close debate? Senator from Morgan to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I disagree with my learned colleagues who've expressed opposition to this bill. There is a reason to do it. There's an important reason to do it. And in my mind, there's only one reason to do it, and that is to allow our judiciary to be structured in such a fashion that it creates a broader body of jurisprudence, broader development of West Virginia law. Now, this is not just my idea. This is not the kooky idea of the Senate Judiciary Chairman. I want to talk a little bit about the history of this idea in West Virginia. In the Judicial Reorganization Amendment of 1974, when the citizens of this state ratified the reorganization of the judiciary in our state constitution, they wrote into it and ratified language in Article 8 that expressly provided for the creation by the legislature, if it chose to do so, of an intermediate appellate court. 45 years ago, Mr. President, the people who crafted that reorganization amendment knew and contemplated that it was going to be necessary, if not necessary, immediately. There has been, the senator from Harrison is correct, there has been some momentum and push for it again over the last 5 years or so in the legislature, but that's not new. That's not new itself. I want to walk everybody back, if I may, a little bit in time. 10 years ago, we had crisis in our state judiciary, outrage in the state and beyond, that we had an appellate structure in West Virginia that didn't automatically review cases. As a result of that, Governor Manchin, Joe Manchin, governor of the state at the time, appointed a commission on the West Virginia judiciary to study it. They issued their final report in November of 2009. So we're not quite 10 years ago yet, but we're approaching 10 years ago. And I'm going to be reading from the report of that commission on the future of the West Virginia judiciary, but I want to talk first a little bit about who served on that commission, Mr. President. There were luminaries of the West Virginia State Bar, the National Bar, Caprice Roberts, a visiting professor of law, the Columbus School of Law, and the Catholic University of America was on that commission. Mary McQueen, who was president and chief executive officer of the National Center for State Courts. The Honorable John McCuskey, he was with Schumann McCuskey Slicer at the time, but had been, at that time, he was a former justice of the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. Joyce McConnell, who's dean of the College of Law at WVU. She's now the provost for the university. She served on that. Marvin Masters, well-known local attorney from the Masters Law Firm. Andrew McQueen, who was a circuit judge here in Kanawha County, Tom Haywood, well-known attorney at Bowles Rice, McDavid, Graff and Love here in Charleston, Sandra Chapman, who was at the time president of the West Virginia State Bar, Cart Goodwin, who had been Governor Manchin's chief of staff and followed that as a short term as a United States Senator representing West Virginia in the United States Senate. And of course, Sandra Day O'Connor. Sandra Day O'Connor, former Justice of the United States Supreme Court, served on this commission that was formed in 2009, or maybe even a little earlier than that, but made its recommendations in 2009 on what West Virginia might do to improve the structure of its judiciary. And I will read, if I may, from their report. And I will say, Mr. President, they made a number of different recommendations. Many of them have been adopted. They recommended that the legislature codify the judicial vacancy appointment procedure, and the legislature did that in 2011, passed statutes to do that. They made other recommendations. They made a recommendation about the creation of a business court, and West Virginia did that, and it's in operation now. But there's an important recommendation that has been ignored, Mr. President. That's why this bill is here. Let me read. The legislature should act to establish an intermediate appellate court. That's what the recommendation said. And it would ease the burden on the Supreme Court of Appeals, and these are the important words in my mind, and free the High Court to continue hearing discretionary docket focused on important or novel legal issues and expand the core functions of our appellate judicial system. It is true. It is true, I'll concede the point, that there has been some decline in the number of cases that go to the Supreme Court now, but the court is no less busy than it was in 2009 by virtue of the fact that they have changed their rules and decided to issue a decision in every case. And so in that way, in some ways, they have made themselves more busy than they had been before, as a response to the criticism that the judiciary received 10 years ago over having the judicial proceedings in West Virginia not be subject to an automatic right of review and appeal. Interestingly, this commission, Mr. President, recommended specifically that the court be constituted as an appointed court. And so, but what was interesting to me, and it remains interesting to me, is if you dig into this opinion, this report from 10 years ago, what you'll find is language that would remind us all that it wasn't new then either. The report 10 years ago pointed out that there had been an identical recommendation 10 years before that from yet another commission appointed in West Virginia to study the future of the judiciary. I'm reading from the report, the 2009 report, Mr. President, if I may. Quote, "This idea, of course, is not new. Over 10 years ago, the Commission on the Future of the West Virginia Judicial System urged the legislature to create an intermediate court of appeals, writing," and the report quotes the report from 10 years before. Here's that quote. "A full-time intermediate appellate court would allow the justices of the Supreme Court time to consider and write opinions that have a defining impact on matters of law and public policy. The creation of an intermediate appellate court would relieve the Supreme Court from hearing and deciding routine cases that do not involve unresolved issues of law, constitutional challenges, or public policy." So it was true 10 years ago, Mr. President. It was true 20 years ago. It was true 45 years ago when the citizens ratified the language in the Judicial Reorganization Amendment, and it is still true today. We need an intermediate appellate court in West Virginia. Now, I do want to respond specifically to a couple of the points that my colleagues have raised in opposition. The cost of the court is, of course, a consideration that we should be mindful of. And I hope we are always mindful and weigh the costs and benefit of any measure that is under consideration in the Senate, in the legislature. There have been changes since last year's bill. Last year's bill required the creation of 2 panels, with the state being divided into North and South divisions, and it was more than twice as expensive. The fiscal note that I've seen most recently has the cost of this court now between $3 and $4 million. I know that we had a fiscal note last year that was like $10 million, and I know it caused a lot of members of this body heartburn. But at a cost of under $4 million, it is certainly achievable, and in my opinion, I know not everyone agrees, but in my opinion, worth the expenditure of funds to build the kind of structure in the judiciary that will serve this state going forward. As was conceded by my dear friend, the senator from Harrison, West Virginia is the largest state in the country, we believe, that does not have an intermediate appellate court. All of us should be concerned about delays, but I disagree. I don't think this bill and the creation of an intermediate appellate court is going to necessarily mean delays. In fact, Mr. President, I think for many cases it will mean expedited appellate process, because we're not processing every case through the intermediate appellate court and the Supreme Court. This bill affects some division of those cases, and I think what it'll do is allow appeals to move faster than they do now. Even with a 3-judge panel. So there was an argument made in opposition that it would cost litigants more money. For the same reasons, Mr. President, I don't believe that's true. Now, if a case does have to be processed through 2 levels of appeal, there might be some additional expense there, but I think the vast majority of cases that are heard by the intermediate appellate court or the Supreme Court on direct appeal will move faster, and it will not add any additional cost for the litigants. And remember, importantly, appeals to the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals from an intermediate appellate court will be discretionary, once again, as they were a decade ago, meaning that they don't have to be heard. If they've been reviewed fairly, it's important. And I'll commend our Supreme Court 10 years ago for understanding the outrage, the public outrage about how can it be that cases don't get a review at all. And designing a process, the only process they could design really, Mr. President, under their rules to make sure that every case at least got some review and a decision. They were right to do that, but it hasn't solved the problem, because what they have strapped themselves to is the review by the Supreme Court of every case, even those which are routine in nature and don't need to be reviewed, other than, not reviewed for the purpose of expanding or expounding upon the law, but reviewed only for the purpose of making sure that the lower court applied the appropriate legal standards. This bill will be transformative, Mr. President. It will give to the citizens of West Virginia the structure of the judiciary that they deserve, that will ensure As was noted by the study on the future of the judiciary more than 20 years ago now, more than 20 years ago, to allow the Supreme Court to decide cases and write opinions that will have a defining impact on matters of law and policy for the state, and not to spend its time in routine cases that do not involve unresolved issues of law, constitutional challenges, or public policy. Mr. President, I urge passage of this bill.
Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Every member voted. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question being 17 yeas, 16 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 295 relating to crimes against public justice, third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 295 amends and reenacts a single section of the code, and it would amend and reenact Chapter 61, Article 5, Section 17, which defines the offenses of obstructing an officer, fleeing from an officer, making false statements to an officer, interfering with emergency communications, and prescribing penalties and definitions. So if the bill is enacted and becomes law, it will add to the definition of obstruction court security officers, the state fire marshal, or any full-time deputy or assistant fire marshal as people for whom a person could be prosecuted if he or she obstructed them in the performance of their duties. That section now applies to law enforcement officers, probation officers, and parole officers. So we're adding court security officers, state fire marshal, and full-time deputy fire marshals, and that's the same throughout all the subsections with the various offenses that are delineated in the bill. For instance, subsection B is an attempt to disarm such a person. Subsection C is impede or obstruct. Subsection D is fleeing or attempting to flee. So we're adding those other classification of officers throughout the bill and the various offenses that are defined by the statute. Be happy to try to answer questions. Otherwise, I urge the bill's passage.
Further discussion? Senator from Brooke County.
Mr. President, I too rise in support of this bill. From a policy standpoint, I think that it makes good policy looking through here. Subsection A with our obstruction statute by adding court security officers. These are the folks that provide security at all of our courts, the circuit court, the magistrate court level, and also going down and looking at C when we talk about the state fire marshal or the assistant fire marshal. These are people that conduct investigations and do so in matters that may involve a criminal element. So I rise in support of this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting, having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 489 relating to Pharmacy Audit Integrity Act, third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 489 deals with pharmacy benefit managers, and it does basically 4 things. And I'll go into each. I'll just first name all 4, and then I'll go into a little bit of detail on each one. But it provides for specific criteria for an auditing entity to follow to determine when chargeback or recoupment involving a dispensed product is appropriate. Number 2, it requires a pharmacy benefit manager to be licensed in the state of West Virginia. Number 3, it prohibits a pharmacy benefit manager from engaging in specific reimbursement practices with respect to the 340B pharmacy entities. And number 4, it requires PEIA to include information in contracts related to the pharmacy benefit managers. First on that list was the auditing component, and by providing specific criteria for an auditing entity to follow to determine when a chargeback or recoupment is being enforced, protects the pharmacies for some of the practices that have been happening in the past as far as recoupment of the entire price for a product when maybe it was a 1 cc overfill. They just, the auditing entity would come back and recoup the whole price as opposed to just recouping the part for the error. There are protections in here for the pharmacy benefit manager in the auditing component here. And basically, if there's fraud or other intentional and willful misrepresentation, dispensing in excess of the benefit design as established by the plan, prescriptions not filled in accordance with the prescriber's order, the doctor's order, and actual overpayment to the pharmacy. So those protections still exist, but this auditing component will help provide some necessary protections. The second component received a lot of attention in the committee. It requires a pharmacy benefit manager to be licensed in the state of West Virginia as opposed to being registered. So currently they're registered with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner. Now they'll have to be licensed with the Office of the Insurance Commissioner. The bill states what those licensing requirements will be, sets fees and terms of the licensing, also terms for revocation of the license. It also gives rulemaking authority to the Office of the Insurance Commissioner with regards to setting up the licensing process. The applicant must demonstrate a network adequacy. So the PBM network, for instance, will have to have a network adequacy within the state. So they can't just be a mail order type of operation. It requires them to have at least one brick and mortar store, but that's it. That's the only requirement. The rest of it could be mail order, but that's what how the network adequacy was defined. It also, and this last part in the licensing is the most important part, because this actually applies to the whole bill, including the parts I'm going to discuss later, such as the 340Bs. But it gives the insurance commissioner enforcement powers over this section, and that's been the problem with these PBMs being registered and not licensed. There's been no enforcement power whatsoever, so no way to process any complaints from the retail pharmacies or the hospital-based pharmacies or the FQHCs. So now that with having to be licensed, there's a system in place to hear the complaints and to process the complaints and to determine what the issues are. Third thing on the list is from this bill is it prohibits a PBM or a pharmacy benefit manager from engaging in a specified reimbursement practice with respect to a 340B pharmacy. Now, 340B pharmacies are pharmacies that participate in the 340B federal program, and in short, that program helps our underinsured, our uninsured, our underserved areas, helps keep drug prices down, and helps promote many different programs that help serve in the health care of those types of individuals. And by having this protection in this bill for the 340B pharmacies, it ensures that program remains in place as it is today, which accounts for about $200 million to the 340B pharmacies in the state of West Virginia. Lastly, this bill requires PEIA to include information in contracts related to the pharmacy benefit managers. This part's important as far as, it says all contracts must have quarterly reporting to PEIA for all pharmacy claims. The amount paid to the pharmacy provider per claims, included but not limited to the cost of the drug reimbursed, the dispensing fees, and the co-payments. The amount charged to the agency for each claim by the PBM is also in the contracts. In the event that there's a difference between that amount for the claim, the pharmacy benefit manager shall report an itemization of all administrative fees, rebates, or other processing charges associated with the claim. The last important part of this PEIA component is an aggregate of non-proprietary data shall be reported at least quarterly to the Joint Committee on Government and Finance after this bill is enforced, if it does pass. And that's important. It's not individual information, but that'll show this body how much money is being left on the table. For instance, Medicaid went through a similar process, not a bill like this, but they got rid of their PBM. They saved over $50 million. So that information is going to be important for us to review to determine, to help set drug prices and save money for PEIA in the future. Mr. President, I urge passage of the bill.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion. If not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results on this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 502, exempting sales of investment metal bullion and coins. Third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 502 exempts the sales of investment metal bullion and investment coins from consumer sales and use taxes. Currently, West Virginia collects a 6% sales tax on all sales of gold and other precious metals, similar to the treatment given other tangible personal property. In addition, municipalities are able to tax this sales rate or at a sales rate of 1%. The sales are also subject to capital gains tax, and I want to reword that just for a second. And that is the purchases are subject to a capital gains tax, so it's like double taxation. The bill defines investment metal bullion and investment coins and provides an exemption for the state sales and use tax for products meeting the definitions. The purpose of the bill is to recognize the role of such products as investment vehicles. The fiscal note is estimated of a loss to the state of a revenue between $50,000 and $100,000. Mr. President, I'd like to request the right to close and I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results on this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from July 1, 2019. Request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that the bill be made effective from, or moves that the bill be made effective from passage, and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage be used to make it so effective. And the date is July 1, 2019. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do. I declare is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective July 1, 2019. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House. Further bills on third reading.
Engrossed Senate Bill 545 relating to HIV testing. Third reading of the bill.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The Senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 545 is short and sweet here. This bill basically removes the insurance commissioner's authority to develop standards for consent. Those standards for consent that are used by insurers to test for the presence of HIV antibody, and they replace those standards for consent with the authority to develop underwriting questions used by insurers that test for the presence of HIV antibody in connection with the applications of life insurance or health insurance policies. There was a rule promulgated in 2003 that is outdated. Section 5 of this rule is being stricken, and the authority of the insurance commissioner to detail the HIV protocol used by insurers is removed. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 550, declaring certain claims to be moral obligations of state. Third reading of the bill.
Question before the Senate is shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senior senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 550 is the annual claims bill pertaining to over expenditures of state entities. It directs payment of certain claims made by those who have provided commodities and services to the state agencies who have not been paid, because if the claims were paid, the agencies would have unlawfully spent more than their authorized appropriations, or for services not lawfully contracted. The Claims Commission has reviewed and approved the payment of these claims, subject to the approval and appropriation of the legislature. The claims are against the Department of Health and Human Resources for indigent burials, providing $75,434, and the Racing Commission for $2,435.88. Mr. President, I urge passage.
Is there further discussion? Further discussion. Senator from Monroe County.
Thank you, Mr. President. With Senator asking for a ruling from the chair with Rule 43 of our, just want to check and see. I am a funeral director and involved with some of this, so just want to see if I was allowed to vote on this.
In response to your inquiry, it is my understanding that you are a member of a class and will be required to vote. Further motions or requests? Not. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, there being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The junior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Junior senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, being 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action and send it to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2481, permitting retail sale of alcoholic beverages on Sundays after 1 p.m. Third reading of the bill.
The question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Is there discussion? The senator from Morgan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The short title is pretty accurate on this one. The bill will amend 2 sections of the state code, both relating to acts of retail alcohol licensees. But if the bill becomes law, it will permit the sale of alcohol on Sundays after 1 p.m., except for Easter Sunday and Christmas, when Christmas falls on a Sunday. The bill prescribes sales on Easter or Christmas. Be happy to try to answer questions.
Further discussion? Not, all those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? Senator from Nicholas? If so, the clerk will close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question being 22 yeas, 11 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than the majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Junior Senator from the 17th. Oh, excuse me. Clerk has a title amendment.
Committee on the Judiciary moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question before the Senate is adoption of title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the title amendment adopted. The Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage.
Junior Senator from the 17th moves that the bill be made effective from passage. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? So the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question being 29 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. Clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Further bills on third reading?
No, sir.
Bills on second reading?
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 29, creating 10-year tax credits for businesses locating on post-coal mine sites. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 117, relating to incentives for consolidating local governments. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 147, shifting funding from Landfill Closure Assistance Fund to local solid waste authorities. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading. The Senator from Preston County seeks recognition.
Point of inquiry.
Senator may.
On the chamber automation system, there is a filed amendment to Bill 147. You didn't get it?
Senator from Preston County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that Senate Bill 147 be advanced to third reading with right to amend.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Senate Bill 333, exempting automobiles 25 years or older from personal property taxes. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
If not, the bill be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 512, regulating pawnbrokers.
Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill lie over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Senate Bill 617, relating to method of payment to municipal pension security funds. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 618, relating to effect on levy rate when appraisals results in tax increase. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
Not, the bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. The Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second reading.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered. Introduction of guests. Remarks by members of the Senate. Miscellaneous business. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I move the Senate stand in recess until 2:30.
Are there announcements? Senior Senator from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance is going to meet at 3 p.m. today at 4:51 m or 15 minutes following the conclusion of the afternoon floor session.
Senator from further announcements. The Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Natural Resources will be meeting today at 1:30 in 208 West. Agenda has been posted.
Senator from Marshall County.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Conference Committee for House Bill 2351 will meet immediately following these announcements at recess in the back of the Senate chamber. And second announcement is your Health Committee meeting, or your Health Committee will meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. in 4:51 m.
The senator from Wetzel County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure will meet tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock in room 451M, and then again on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock in room 451M.
Further announcements, the senator from Brooke County.
Mic drop there. Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Military will meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. in room 208 West.
Senator from Wood County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Banking and Insurance will meet today at 2 o'clock in 451M.
Further announcements? Further announcements. Mr. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick reminder, our panoramic picture will be this Wednesday at 9:30 a.m., just to remind the body.
Further announcements. Not question for the Senate is, shall the Senate stand in recess until 2:30 today? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the Senate in recess until 2:30 p.m. today.